The gods did not build this world for you. They built it for themselves. And then something went wrong. Before Skyrim had mountains, before Tamriel had a name, before time even moved in a straight line, there was a moment, a choice, and most of the gods who made that choice did not survive it. Tonight, we go back to the very beginning, not to the beginning of the game, not to the beginning of the empire. We go back to the beginning of everything, to a time when reality itself was still being decided, when the beings who became gods were still arguing about whether a world should exist at all. What you are about to hear is not in any loading screen. It is not in any quest dialogue. It lives in the oldest, quietest corners of Elder Scrolls lore, in creation myths, in ancient texts, in theories that fans have pieced together over decades. Some of this is confirmed lore. Some of it is what players believe when they read between the lines. All of it happened before the first sunrise. In the time before time, there was no Nirn. There was no sky, no stone, no cold wind moving through pine trees. There were only the Atada, the original spirits drifting through a place that had no shape and no edges. They did not have names yet. They did not have bodies. They were simply forces, moving through endless space, doing what forces do when nothing is stopping them. Then Lorcan came to them with an idea. The gods did not choose to create Nirn. According to a long-standing fan theory, one grounded deeply in Elder Scrolls creation texts, Lorcan tricked them into it. The story goes like this. Lorcan was one of the Atada. He was not the strongest, he was not the most powerful, but he was the most persuasive. He came to the other spirits with a plan. He told them that a world, a physical place could be built, that it would be something new, something worth making. What he did not tell them was the full cost. To create a physical world, the spirits would have to give up part of themselves. They would have to push pieces of their own power, their own being, into the new creation. Some would lose a great deal. Some would lose almost everything. The world would be built from what they gave up. Many of the Atada agreed to Lorcan's plan. They stepped into the process of creation. And as they did, they became smaller, less free, more fixed. The wind outside is quiet tonight. The trees do not move. And somewhere beneath all that stillness, the weight of what was given up still holds the ground together. Magnus left the creation of Nirn before it was finished. Every Elder Scrolls text agrees on this. But the reason given in official lore is that he simply changed his mind. Some fans believe that explanation is too simple, and that the real reason is something heavier. The theory holds that Magnus did not change his mind. He saw something. Specifically, he looked at what the creation of Nirn was going to do, not just to the spirits building it, but to the world itself, and he saw the end of it. He saw that Nirn was not going to last, that it was built with a flaw at its center that could not be removed. So he left, not out of cowardice, out of knowledge. When Magnus tore himself free of the creation process, he left a hole in the sky. That hole became the sun. The smaller spirits who followed him left smaller holes. Those became the stars. This is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. But the theory adds one more layer. Magnus did not just leave. He took something with him. A piece of the original design, a blueprint of what Nirn was supposed to be before the flaws were added. That knowledge became the source of all magicka. Every spell cast in Tamriel, then, is a small echo of a world that was planned but never fully built. The stars look cold from the ground, but they are not cold. They are windows, and on the other side of every one of them, something still remembers. Deep in the swamps of Black Marsh, the hiss trees grow in silence. They are old, older than any elf, older than any human civilization, older, some fans believe, than the gods themselves. There is a theory that the Hist were present before the creation of Nirn, not just present but involved, that when the Atada were shaping the world, the Hist were already there in some form. Not as trees, not yet, but as something, a quiet intelligence already embedded in what the world was becoming. The Argonians, the lizard people of Black Marsh, have a deep connection to the Hist. They drink from the trees guide them. The trees speak to them in ways that other races cannot hear or understand. Some players believe this connection is not just cultural, it is biological, it is ancient. The Hist shaped the Argonians specifically to be their caretakers in a physical world, and the Hist shaped themselves into trees because trees are patient. Trees can wait a very long time. The theory goes further. The Hist did not just watch the creation of Nirn, they nudged it, quietly, in small ways. They pushed the growing world in directions that would keep them safe, keep their swamps wet, keep their roots deep. If this is true, then Black Marsh is not just a region of Tamriel, it is the oldest territory on the continent, held by beings who were there before the first stone was laid. The Hist do not speak to outsiders. They have never needed to. Lorcan is remembered as the trickster, the schemer, the god who deceived the others and paid for it when his heart was torn out and thrown across the world. Most accounts treat him as the villain of the creation story. Some fans think that reading is completely wrong. The theory is this: Lorcan understood something that the other Etada did not. He understood that pure existence, pure spiritual drifting without a physical world was not living. It was simply existing, going nowhere, becoming nothing over an eternity of emptiness. He wanted more for the spirits around him. He wanted them to have something, something to stand on, something to fight for, something to lose. Yes, the creation of Nirn cost the spirits greatly. Yes, they became smaller and more fixed. Yes, some of them faded entirely in the process. But Lorcan believed that a shorter life with real weight was worth more than an endless existence with none. He was not lying to the other spirits, according to this theory. He was making a choice on their behalf, a choice he knew they would not make freely, so he made it for them. The Daedric princes, the spirits who refuse to participate in creation, are powerful. They are ancient. They are free. And they have spent all of recorded time playing games with the mortals who live on the world Lorcan built. Lorcan gave the lesser spirits a home, even if they did not ask for one. His heart still beats somewhere under Red Mountain. It has been beating for longer than any kingdom has stood. The Etada, who became the Aedra, the gods of the mortal world, gave up so much of themselves during creation that they can no longer act directly in the world. This is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. They work through intermediaries, through mortals, through symbols and shrines and small, quiet moments of guidance. But there is a theory about why this limitation exists, and it points to something deliberate. The theory holds that the Aedra are not just weakened, they are restrained. Something in the process of creating Nirn bound them to it. They put so much of themselves into the world that they cannot step back from it the way the Daedric princes can. They are not just tired, they are anchored, and that anchor was placed there intentionally. By whom? The theory does not say clearly. Some fans point to Lorcan, others point to the rules of Aetherius, the plane of pure magic that Magnus fled to. A few point to something older than any named being. Whatever the source, the result is the same. The Aedra watch over Tamriel because they cannot leave it. Their temples and shrines are not just places of worship. They are anchor points, spots where the gods are most tied to the world they helped build. When you pray at a shrine in Skyrim, something listens, not out of kindness, out of connection. The god on the other end of that prayer is as bound to the moment as you are. The cold stone of the shrine holds warmth in it still, even in the deepest winter. The dragon breaks are among the strangest events recorded in Elder Scrolls history. They are moments when time stopped working correctly, when the same era seemed to happen more than once, when history recorded contradictions that both appeared to be true. Most explanations in lore treat dragon breaks as rare accidents, side effects of powerful events, like the activation of the Numidium. Some fans believe dragon breaks are not accidents, they are cracks, permanent damage left behind from the creation of Nirn itself. The theory starts with the basic idea that Nirn was not built to last forever. It was built from beings who were never meant to be physical. They were forced into a fixed shape, and fixed things develop cracks over time. When the Atada pushed themselves into the framework of creation, they did so imperfectly. The joins between their contributions did not always line up. Time, when it began to flow, did not flow perfectly through every part of the world. There were seams. Most of the time, those seams hold. But under enough pressure, when something powerful enough strikes the right point, the seam opens. Time doubles back. History writes itself twice. Every dragon break in Elder Scrolls history, according to this theory, happened at a place where the original construction of Nirn was weakest. The cracks have always been there. They were built in. The world just learned to ignore them most of the time. Somewhere deep beneath the ground, the seams are still there, quiet, holding, for now. There is a name that appears in the oldest Elder Scrolls creation texts, Anu, and beside it, another name, Padome. Anu is stillness, order, the desire for things to remain as they are. Padome is change, chaos, the desire for things to become something new. All existence in Elder Scrolls cosmology comes from the tension between these two forces. The Aedra came from Anu's side. The Daedric princes came from Padome's side. And Nirn itself sits somewhere in the middle, a place where both forces are always present and always in conflict. Some fans believe that Anu and Padome are not just abstract forces. They are beings, ancient and vast, beyond any individual god. And the creation of Nirn was not just a decision made by the Atada. It was a move in a much longer game between Anu and Padome. Lorkhan, in this theory, was Padome's piece on the board. The idea of a mortal world, a place of change, of struggle, of things growing and dying, was exactly what Padome wanted. The Aedra, drawn from Anu's side, resisted, but they were persuaded, or tricked, or simply outnumbered, and so Nirn was built, a world of change, wrapped in just enough order to hold together. The game between Anu and Padome did not end when the world was made. It simply moved inside it. Every war, every famine, every quiet harvest, every sleeping traveler in a warm inn, all of it is part of the same long, slow argument that began before the stars existed. The Magnagae are the stars. This is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. They are the spirits who followed Magnus out of the creation of Nirn, tearing small holes in the fabric of the sky as they escaped. But some fans believe the stars are doing something more than just existing. The theory holds that each star, each Magnagae, is still watching, still paying attention to the world they left behind. They are not cold lights in an empty sky. They are observers, positioned above the world, with a clear view of everything that happens on it. And they are not neutral. Some fans point to the way certain events in Elder Scrolls history seem to align with astronomical patterns, the right stars in the right positions, the way the moons behave around major historical events, the way the moth priests, who read the Elder Scrolls with their eyes until they go blind, are sometimes called star readers in older texts. The theory says the Magnagae left because they would not participate in creation. But leaving did not mean they stopped caring. They watch from above because they cannot interfere from above. Their only power is observation. Every time a mortal in Tamriel looks up at the sky, they meet the gaze of something that has been watching the world since before it had a surface. The stars are not beautiful, they are patient. The process of creating Nirn had a name in early Elder Scrolls texts. It was called the Sundering, or sometimes the Convention. Different texts name it differently, but the result was the same. The Atada came together, the world was shaped, and everything after that was a consequence. Some fans believe the Sundering left behind more than just a world. It left behind pieces, fragments of the original process, shards of intent that did not get absorbed into the creation properly. These fragments drifted. Some of them became artifacts, real, physical objects that appear throughout the Elder Scrolls games and carry impossible properties, objects that predate every civilization, objects that should not exist in a physical world. The Amulet of Kings is sometimes named in this theory. So are the tools of Kagrenac, so are certain Elder Scrolls. The idea is that when the Etada poured themselves into creation, they did so with intent, with desire, with will, and some of that will hardened into physical form, not as gods, not as spirits, as objects. You can pick them up, you can carry them, but they do not belong to you. They belong to a process that finished a very long time ago. They are just waiting for something to call them back. The old shrines of Skyrim sit heavy in the dark. Some of the stones in their foundations are older than the shrines themselves, older than the cultures that built around them. Nobody placed those stones. They were simply there when the builders arrived. The Towers of Tamriel are a confirmed concept in Elder Scrolls lore. They are massive structures, some natural, some built, that are said to hold the fabric of reality stable. Each one is anchored to the world in a specific way. Each one has a stone, an object at its heart that connects it to the original act of creation. The white gold tower in Cyrodiil, Red Mountain in Morrowind, the throat of the world in Skyrim. Each is a tower in the metaphysical sense. Some fans believe the towers were not built to protect Tamriel, they were built to repair it. The theory connects back to the creation of Nirn. When the Etada shaped the world imperfectly, they knew it. The cracks in creation, the seams where time does not quite hold, were visible to the beings who made them. The towers were their attempt to patch the damage, to pin the world down at its weakest points. Each tower, in this theory, marks a spot where the world almost did not form correctly, a point where reality came close to failing. And the stone, at each tower's heart, is not just a symbol, it is a plug, a seal, keeping something from leaking out of the original construction error. When a tower falls, as the towers have fallen throughout Elder Scrolls history, the patch fails. The crack opens a little wider, the world becomes a little less stable. There are towers still standing. Some fans think there are not enough of them. The throat of the world rises in the dark, far above the clouds. It has been standing since before the First Kingdom. Something at its core is still holding. Lorkhan's heart is still in Tamriel. Red Mountain in Morrowind holds it or held it, depending on which era of the story you are reading. It beats, it pulses. It is the most powerful physical object in the known world. There is a theory that the heart was not torn out as a punishment. It was placed there as a key. The argument goes like this. Lorkhan knew the world he was building would not last forever. He understood the imperfections in the design. He knew that at some point, the cracks would become too wide. The world would need to be remade or ended. So he put his heart inside it. Not because the other gods forced him to, because he chose to. The heart is both an anchor and an engine. It keeps Nirn running when it should have failed centuries ago, but it is also capable of being used, activated, pointed at the framework of the world in a specific way. Kagrenac, the Dwemer master craftsman, built his tools to tap into that heart. He believed he could use it to make his people immortal. Whether he succeeded or failed depends on which theory you follow about where the Dwemer went. But the heart was not surprised by Kagrenac's work. Some fans believe the heart called him to it, that it was waiting for someone with the knowledge and the will to try. Lorkhan's plan was never finished. His heart is still keeping time down in the dark. It is patient. Whatever it is waiting for has not arrived yet. All of this happened before the first name was spoken. The beings who shaped the world are mostly quiet now, but the world they made is still here, still holding, still turning, still carrying everything they put into it. In the Merethic era, the time before written history, the elves were one people. They called themselves the Aldmer. They came from a place called the Somerset Isles, off the southwestern coast of Tamriel. They were tall, long-lived, and certain that they were the closest living things to gods. Over centuries, they spread across the continent, and then, Slowly, they stopped being one people. What happened to the Eldmer is one of the quietest mysteries in all of Elder Scrolls lore. The Elven split was not supposed to happen the way it did. The Aldmer did not simply grow apart over time and develop different cultures. The differences between their descendants, the Dwemer, the Falmer, the Aelid, the Dunmer, the Bosmer, are too deep for simple cultural drift. Some fans believe the split was engineered, deliberately caused by a Daedric prince who had something to gain from a divided elven race. The theory points to Boethiah, the Daedric prince of plots, of betrayal, of overthrowing the old order. Boethiah has a confirmed history of involvement with elven peoples. It was Boethiah who first whispered to the Chimer, the ancestors of the Dunmer, and convinced them to leave the Aldmer behind. That event is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore, but some fans believe Boethiah's involvement started earlier, long before the Chimer left. That Boethiah spent centuries quietly moving through Aldmer society, planting ideas, encouraging divisions, pushing individuals toward beliefs that would eventually pull the whole civilization apart. A united elven race, spanning all of Tamriel, would be very difficult to manipulate. A dozen fractured subraces, each suspicious of the others, would be much easier. The Aldmer never saw it coming. By the time the fractures were visible, the cause had already been forgotten. The Snow Elves are remembered in Skyrim as a people destroyed by the Atmarans, driven underground, forced to eat toxic fungi in the dark until they lost their sight and their minds and became the Falmer, blind, hunched creatures that attack on instinct. That is the official history. Some fans believe the Snow Elves chose to go underground. Not all of them, not willingly, but a significant part of their leadership made a deliberate decision to descend. The theory holds that certain Snow Elf scholars and priests had already foreseen what the Atmoran arrival meant. They had read the signs. They knew the surface war was unwinnable, and they believed that survival underground, even under the terms the Dwemer offered, was better than extinction above. The Dwemer offered the Snow Elves shelter in exchange for servitude. That part is confirmed. But the theory adds a layer. Some Snow Elf leaders actively negotiated that arrangement. They accepted the fungi knowingly. They believed that blindness and servitude would pass, that their people would endure, adapt, and eventually reclaim something. They were wrong, but the choice was still theirs. The Falmer that players encounter in Dwemer ruins are the descendants of a people who made a calculated decision in the dark. The calculation failed, but it was never forced. The ruins are cold and deep. The Falmer move through them without light. They do not remember what light looked like. The Dwemer rejected the gods entirely. They called the Aedra and the Daedra equally false. They trusted only what could be measured, built, and tested. This is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. Their philosophy is well documented in their texts. But some fans believe the Dwemer's rejection of the gods was not philosophy, it was memory. The theory suggests that the Dwemer, at some point in the early Merethic era, had a direct experience with the Aedra, and that the experience ended badly. Not a metaphorical disappointment, a real event. A moment where the Dwemer asked something of the gods and received nothing, or received something that caused harm. The details of that event, if it happened, are gone. The Dwemer kept records of almost everything, but their earliest records, the ones from before their theological shift, do not survive. Some fans believe those records were deliberately destroyed by the Dwemer themselves, because what happened was something they did not want to carry forward. A people does not reject the concept of gods entirely without a reason. Skepticism grows slowly, but complete rejection, the kind that gets written into law and taught to children as fact, usually comes from something personal. The Dwemer built their own god instead. They found the heart of Lorkhan beneath Red Mountain and built tools to reshape it. They did not want to worship power. They wanted to hold it. Their ruins sit in silence now. The automatons still walk the halls. Whatever the Dwemer were looking for, they did not find it in a way that kept them here. The Aelid, sometimes called the Wild Elves, ruled Cyrodiil for thousands of years. They built cities of white stone and starlight. They practiced a form of magic that was wild and layered and deeply tied to the stars above. When humans eventually rose against them and the Alessian rebellion ended their power, most of what they knew was lost. Some fans believe the Aelid did not invent their star magic. They inherited it. The theory holds that before the Aldmer arrived in Cyrodiil, something else was already there. Not elves, not humans, something older. A people or a presence that had already developed a deep relationship with the stars and the magical currents running through the land. When the Aldmer, who became the Aelid, settled Cyrodiil, they encountered traces of this older presence, ruins, patterns carved into stone, places where the ground hummed with something that did not match anything in Aldmeri tradition, and they learned from it. The Aelid absorbed what they found. They built their own system around it. They called it their own. Over centuries, the original source was forgotten, and the tradition became simply Aelid. This would explain why Aelid magic feels different from other elven traditions, why their ruins have a particular quality that Dwemer ruins and Snow Elf ruins do not share. The foundation was laid by someone else. The white towers of the Aelids are gone now. The stones are scattered across Cyrodiil, but on certain nights, near the oldest ruins, something in the ground still responds to starlight in a way that no one has fully explained. The Dunmer, the dark elves of Morrowind, are perhaps the most distinct of all the elven subraces. Their skin turned grey, their eyes turned red. Their culture shifted so far from the original Aldmer template that they barely resemble their ancestors. The accepted explanation is that the Daedric Prince Azura changed them as a mark of their new path. Some fans look at the Dunmer and see something older than Azura's blessing. They see evidence of a much earlier split, one that predates the Chimer's departure from the Aldmer entirely. The theory holds that certain Aldmer lineages carried traits from the very beginning that predisposed them toward a different path. Darker tendencies, a stronger pull toward Daedric forces, a resistance to the structured, orderly theology of mainstream Aldmer culture. These lineages existed quietly within Aldmer society for centuries before Boethia spoke to them. When Boethia came, the theory says, those lineages recognized something familiar, not a foreign voice, a voice that matched something already in them. The Chimer did not abandon the Aldmer because they were converted. They abandoned the Aldmer because they were finally given permission to be what they had always been. The Dunmer carry that history now, in their ash-grey skin and their quiet, ancient temples, in the way they speak of their ancestors not as the distant past, but as something still present, still watching, still involved. Bosmer Wood Elves made a pact with their forest, the Green Pact. They do not harm the vegetation of Valenwood. They eat only meat. They live within the forest's rules, rather than shaping the forest to their own. This is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. Some fans believe the Green Pact was not a choice. It was a condition. The theory holds that when the Aldmer who became the Bosmer entered Valenwood, the forest was already occupied not by people, but by something aware, something old and rooted, and not entirely pleased by the arrival of a new group of settlers. The Green Pact, in this theory, was a negotiation. The Bosmer were allowed to stay in Valenwood on the condition that they gave up their right to harm it. The entity or force behind the forest set the terms. The Bosmer agreed because the alternative was worse. Over time, the negotiation became tradition. The tradition became religion. The original agreement was forgotten and replaced with something that felt like a chosen identity. But the forest still enforces the pact. Bosmer who break it face consequences that feel less like social punishment and more like the land itself responding. Some fans believe that is exactly what it is. Valenwood is old and dense, and full of things that do not need light to move. It has always known exactly who is inside it. There is a belief among some Elder Scrolls fans that the elven subraces are not as separate as they appear. that beneath the cultural differences, beneath the theological splits and the physical changes, all elves share something that has never fully gone away. The theory is about memory, specifically about a buried layer of memory that all elven subraces carry in some form, a shared inheritance from the original Aldmer that surfaces in quiet ways. Dunmer speak of ancestor worship. The dead remain present. They can be communicated with. Some fans believe this is not just a Dunmer cultural tradition. It is a symptom of deeper memory, the Aldmer tendency to hold on to the past, refusing to fully die out, even after thousands of years of separation. Altmer High Elves obsess over bloodline purity. They keep detailed genealogical records going back as far as records allow. Some fans see this as the same impulse, a deep, unspoken need to stay connected to what they originally were. Even the Falmer, blind and broken in their underground tunnels, show traces of structured behavior. Hierarchy, territory, a faint echo of social organization that their Aldmer ancestors would have recognized. The theory holds that elven memory does not fade the way human memory does. It compresses, it buries itself, but it does not disappear. Every elven subrace is still, in some quiet part of themselves, trying to remember something they cannot name. The Somerset Isles sit far to the southwest, across open water, the original home. Most elves will never see it, but some fans believe they feel it in a way they have no words for, on certain still nights when the wind comes from the right direction. The Malma Sea Elves are one of the least discussed elven groups in Elder Scrolls lore. They live on a tropical island called Pyandonia, far south of Tamriel. They have been at war with the Altmer of the Somerset Isles for most of recorded history. They have a deep and unusual connection to sea serpents, and they are led, in older texts, by an immortal king named Orgnum. Some fans believe the Malma are not a subrace that developed separately from the Aldmer. They are what the Aldmer originally were before the structure, before the theology, before the long process of refinement that produced the Altmer. The theory holds that the Malma split from the Proto-Aldmer very early, before the Somerset Isles became the center of elven civilization. Before the Aldmer developed their ordered, hierarchical culture, the Malma left or were pushed out and kept the older, wilder traits that the mainstream Aldmer later moved away from. The Altmer look at the Malma and see enemies. Some fans believe they also see something else, a reflection, a version of themselves that did not go through the long process of cultural and theological refinement, a reminder of what they used to be. Orgnum's immortality, in this theory, is not magic, it is simply age. He has been alive long enough that the concept of dying has become theoretical. The sea is wide between Somerset and Pyandonia, but the distance is not only water, it is everything the Aldmer chose to become, laid out across the waves. The Dwemer and the Snow Elves shared physical space for a very long time. The Snow Elves served in Dwemer cities. They worked alongside Dwemer machines. They were exposed to Dwemer knowledge and Dwemer methods and the peculiar Dwemer way of seeing the world. Some fans believe that exposure left a mark, that the Snow Elves, before they fully became the Falmer, absorbed something from the Dwemer, a way of thinking, a set of ideas that changed how they understood their own situation. The theory holds that certain Snow Elf individuals, deeper in the Dwemer cities and closer to the Dwemer scholars, began to develop a worldview that mirrored their hosts, skeptical, mechanical, less interested in the gods they had once worshipped and more interested in understanding the systems around them. These individuals never became Dwemer, but they stopped being fully Snow Elves in the original sense. They existed in a middle space, changed by proximity to a civilization built entirely on the rejection of everything their own culture held sacred. When the Dwemer disappeared all at once, in a single moment, these changed Snow Elves were left behind in the dark, without their gods, without their original culture, without their hosts. The Falmer did not start as monsters. They started as survivors in the wrong place at the wrong time, carrying ideas that no longer had a home. The deep ruins hold them now. They are the last trace of a people who were changed by a civilization that did not survive either. Every elven subrace has a creation story, a reason for why they are different, a mythological explanation for the split. The Dunmer have Boethiah's whisper, the Bosmer have the Green Pact, the Dwemer have their philosophical rejection, the Falmer have their long descent. Some fans believe all of these stories are true, and that they are all also incomplete. The theory holds that the true story of the elven split has never been written down, not because it was lost, because it was hidden, deliberately kept out of every tradition and every text by the one group that understood it fully, the Altmer. The Altmer are the Aldmer's closest descendants. They kept the bloodlines most intact. They built the most complete records. They know more about early Aldmeri history than any other elven group. And some fans believe the Altmer know exactly what caused the split. They know which event or which decision set the fracture in motion, and they have never shared it. Because the truth reflects badly on their own ancestors. Because the original Aldmer were not the noble, refined people the Altmer have spent thousands of years claiming to descend from. The Altmer maintain their towers and their records, and their careful sense of superiority. But somewhere in the deepest parts of their libraries, in texts that are not shown to outsiders, the real story of the elven fracture is still written. Whether anyone is still brave enough to read it is another question. The Merethic era ended. New peoples arrived. New powers rose. The Aldmer did not disappear. They fractured and changed and became something new in every direction. But somewhere in every elven culture, something of the original people remains, quiet, buried, unspoken. The elves forgot what they were. But forgetting is not the same as losing. All of this happened before the first human kingdom had a name. The world was already ancient by the time the first Nord set foot in Skyrim. In the Merethic era, long before Skyrim had roads or kings, a man came across the frozen sea. His name was Isgramor. He came from Atmora, a cold continent far to the north, already dying from its own long winters. He brought his people to a land that was not empty. The Snow Elves already lived there, and what happened next became one of the most debated stories in all of Elder Scrolls history. The official version says the Snow Elves attacked first, but some fans are not so sure. The Night of Tears is the event that started everything. According to confirmed Elder Scrolls lore, the Snow Elves attacked the Atmaran settlement of Sarthol in the night. They killed almost everyone. Ysgramor and his 2 sons escaped. He sailed back to Atmora, gathered warriors, and returned to take Skyrim by force. That is the story as history tells it. But some fans believe the Night of Tears was not a Snow Elf attack. They believe it was a provocation, planned by Isgramor himself. The theory holds that Isgramor already knew about Sarthol's secret. Something was buried beneath that settlement, something powerful. The Snow Elves knew about it too, and Isgramor understood that the Snow Elves would eventually act to protect it or take it. So he did not wait for them. He made the situation worse on purpose. He pushed the tension until the Snow Elves responded. Then he used that response as his reason to come back with an army. The settlement was sacrificed. The people in it were sacrificed. And Ysgramor returned as a hero with a righteous cause, rather than a conqueror with an agenda. History was written by the side that won. Ysgramor's side won completely. 500 warriors followed Ysgramor back to Skyrim. They are remembered as the 500 companions, brave, loyal, and driven by grief over what the Snow Elves had done. Statues of them stand in Nordic halls. Their names are recorded in Ysgramor's tomb. Some fans believe the 500 companions were not just warriors. They were a cult. The theory points to the secrecy around their formation. Ysgramor did not simply recruit fighters. He selected them. The criteria for selection are never fully explained in any text. Some fans believe the selection was based on something other than fighting ability, a shared belief, a shared oath, or a shared willingness to do things that ordinary warriors would refuse. The Companions organization that exists in Skyrim during the Fourth Era carries its own secrets. The Circle, The inner group within the companions has a secret that members are not told about when they first join. Some fans believe that pattern of hidden inner knowledge goes all the way back to Isgrimmor's original 500. The outer group fights, the inner group knows. What the original inner group knew and what oath they swore in private before boarding those ships has never been written down anywhere that survives. The wind off the Sea of Ghosts is cold. It has always been cold. Some doors were closed a very long time ago and were never meant to reopen. Wuthrad is Isgrimmor's axe. It is one of the most recognizable weapons in Skyrim. Confirmed lore tells us it was shattered at some point after Isgrimmor's time and later reassembled. It is buried with him in his tomb and can be retrieved by the player. Some fans believe Wuthrad was not just a weapon. They believe it was designed to do something specific to elven souls. The theory holds that Wuthrad was crafted with a purpose beyond killing. Each elf it struck did not simply die. Something of that elf, a fragment of memory, of identity, of soul, was pulled into the axe itself, stored there, accumulated over the course of the entire campaign against the Snow Elves. By the time Wisegrammer's war was finished, the axe was full, dense with the absorbed remnants of thousands of Snow Elves who never passed on properly. This would explain why the axe was eventually shattered. Not because it broke in battle, because something about carrying that accumulated weight became dangerous, unmanageable. The axe needed to be divided before it could be safely stored. The pieces were kept separately until they were brought back together in Wisegrimor's tomb. What happens to a weapon that has been holding that much for that long is something fans have debated quietly for years. The axe rests in the dark of the tomb. It has rested there for a very long time. The Atmarans came from a dying continent. Atmara was freezing. The population was collapsing. Resources were gone. The people who crossed the sea to Tamriel were not explorers. They were survivors looking for somewhere to go. But some fans believe the Atmorans brought something with them, something they never disclosed to the Snow Elves, something that had nothing to do with survival. The theory is vague by necessity. The texts that might have described it no longer exist. But it centers on the idea that Atmoran culture, in its final centuries, had developed a relationship with something, a force, a being, a presence that had guided them toward Tamriel specifically. This presence, the theory suggests, knew what was in Tamriel, knew about the buried powers, the ancient sites, the magical currents running through the land. It directed the Atmarans toward those sites before they even landed. The Snow Elves sensed this. They did not attack Sarthal out of fear of the Atmorans themselves. They attacked because of what the Atmorans were carrying with them, an invisible passenger that the Snow Elves could detect and the Atmarans could not fully see. What that presence was, the theory does not name. Some fans point toward a Daedric prince. Others point towards something older than the Daedric princes, something that predates named beings entirely. The ships that crossed from Atmora to Skyrim carried more than people. The sea between the continents is deep and dark. It does not give back what passed over it. Sarthal is one of the oldest sites in Skyrim. In the game, the College of Winterhold conducts an excavation there. Deep beneath the ruins, students and professors uncover the Eye of Magnus, a massive magical artifact of enormous power that has been buried there since the earliest days of Atmaran settlement. Some fans believe it was not buried, it was hidden, and Ysgramor knew it was there before he ever built Sarthal above it. The theory holds that Ysgramor chose the location of Sarthal specifically because of what was beneath the ground there. He did not stumble onto the Eye of Magnus. He was led to it, and he built his settlement over it as a way of claiming it and concealing that claim from everyone around him. The Snow Elves knew about the Eye. That knowledge, in this theory, was the real reason for their attack on Sarthal. They were not striking at the Atmarans out of territorial anger. They were trying to get the Eye back before Ysgramor could use it. They failed. Ysgramor escaped. The Eye stayed buried. The settlement burned above it. And then Ysgramor returned with an army, wiped out the Snow Elves, and ensured that no one who knew the real reason for the attack would survive to tell it. The Eye of Magnus sat beneath Sarthal for thousands of years after that, undisturbed, waiting. Whatever Isgramor planned to do with it, he never did. Or he decided that leaving it buried was the plan all along. Isgramor's tomb sits on a small island off the northern coast of Skyrim. It is massive. It is filled with the spirits of the original 500 companions, and it is built in a way that feels less like a burial site and more like a sealed building, something locked from the outside, designed to keep what is inside from getting out. Some fans believe that is exactly what it is. The theory holds that Ysgramor's tomb was not built to honor the dead. It was built to contain them. The 500 companions, or some portion of them, did not rest peacefully after death. They could not. Whatever oath they swore before boarding those ships bound them to something, and that binding did not dissolve when they died. The spirits inside the tomb are aggressive toward outsiders in the game. That is confirmed. Players who enter without the proper item are attacked immediately by the spirits of legendary Nordic warriors. The theory says those spirits are not protecting Ysgramor's legacy. They are trapped, held in place by the same oath that bound them in life, unable to move on, unable to leave, guarding a tomb they never agreed to guard forever. Ysgramor himself sits at the center, his axe beside him, his face turned toward the door. Whether he is resting or waiting is a question the tomb does not answer. The dragon cult and Ysgramor's people existed in Skyrim at roughly the same time in the early Merethic and First Era. The dragon priests ruled from their temples. Ysgramor's descendants spread across the land. The two powers must have encountered each other. Some fans believe they did more than encounter each other. They made arrangements. The theory holds that Ysgramor's inner circle, the hidden core of the original companions, reached an understanding with certain dragon priests. Not an alliance, not a friendship, a practical agreement. The dragon cult would not interfere with Atmaran expansion into certain regions. In exchange, Ysgramor's people would not reveal certain things they knew about the dragon cult's own hidden activities. What those hidden activities were, the theory does not specify. But the result was a quiet division of Skyrim that lasted for several generations after Ysgramor's death. The dragon priests stayed in their temples. The Atmaran descendants built their holds. And the line between the two territories was never officially drawn, because it was never officially acknowledged. The arrangement eventually collapsed. The Dragon War came. Everything changed. But for a period of time, two very different power structures shared the same land in a silence that suited both of them. That silence was its own kind of agreement. Ysgramor's legacy is enormous. He is the father of Nordic civilization. His name appears in shrines and songs and the deepest codes of honor that Nords still follow in the Fourth Era. He is not remembered as complicated. He is remembered as great. Some fans believe that simplicity is the most suspicious thing about him. Real historical figures are complicated. They make contradictory decisions. They have private motivations that do not match their public image. The more powerful the figure, the more complicated the reality behind the myth. Ysgramor's official record is almost entirely clean, every decision logical, every action justified, every outcome eventually positive for his people. Some fans believe that level of clean historical presentation means the record was edited, not by later historians trying to honor him, by Ysgramor himself while he was still alive. He controlled the narrative because he understood that narratives matter. The story of the Night of Tears, the story of the 500 companions, the story of righteous grief driving a necessary war, all of it arranged into a shape that would last. And it did last. Thousands of years later, Nords still tell those stories. They still believe them. They still name their children after the 500. They still carry axes shaped like Wuthrad. The man who crossed the sea knew exactly what he was doing, not just in war, in memory. The return voyage from Atmora to Skyrim took time. Ships, open water, long weeks of cold and dark and the sound of the sea. Ysgramor spent that time with his 500. Some fans believe something happened on that voyage that has never been recorded. Not a storm, not a battle, something else. A ceremony, a ritual, a moment where the 500 became something more than warriors recruited for a war of revenge. The theory is built on small details scattered across Elder Scrolls texts, references to oaths that cannot be broken by death, references to the 500 as something set apart from ordinary men, the way their spirits behave in the tomb not like soldiers who died in battle, but like beings who agreed to something permanent. Whatever happened on those ships in the dark water between Atmora and Skyrim changed the people on them. They arrived as warriors. They fought as something else. What was said on that voyage, what was promised, what was asked for, and what was given in return. No text records it. The sea between Atmora and Skyrim is deep, cold, full of things that do not rise to the surface. The voyage took weeks, and whatever was agreed to in that dark and open water is still in force. The 500 are still in the tomb. They have not left. Ysgramor lived a long time, long enough to see Skyrim transformed, long enough to see the snow elves broken, long enough to watch the civilization he brought across the sea begin to take permanent root in new ground. He built something that lasted. That much is not in question. What some fans question is what he knew about the cost of what he built, whether he understood, by the end, the full weight of every decision he had made, whether the man who sat in that tomb, with his axe beside him and his 500 around him, was at peace with all of it. There are no texts that record Ysgramor's final years in any detail. He fades from the records as quietly as most powerful figures do present, and then not present, there and then gone. The tomb is sealed. The spirits are inside. The axe is where he left it. Whatever Ysgramor knew and never said, he took it with him into a very deep and very permanent silence. The Merethic era left Skyrim shaped by what Ysgramor chose to do and what he chose not to say. The snow elves were gone from the surface. The Atmorans had become Nords. The land had a new name and new stories and new reasons for being what it was. All of it built on a foundation that no one alive has ever fully seen. There is a place outside of time. It has no walls, exactly, no floor that stays the same from one moment to the next. It shifts and folds and rearranges itself constantly, a library that rewrites its own shelves, a sea of ink that moves like water, a darkness full of eyes that do not blink. This is Apocrypha, and something lives there that has been reading the history of Tamriel since before history began. The Elder Scrolls are among the most powerful objects in all of Tamriel. They contain prophecy, they contain history, they contain things that have not happened yet, and things that happened so long ago that no other record survives. Reading one can blind you. Reading one at the right moment can let you see across time itself. No one made them. That is the official position. They simply exist. They have always existed. Some fans believe that answer is too convenient. They believe the Elder Scrolls were made, and they believe Hermaeus Mora made them. The theory holds that the scrolls are not neutral records of fate. They are a system, a network of documents designed to gather, store, and organize every significant event and decision across all of history. And the being who built that system built it for a reason to have access to everything. Hermaeus Mora is the Daedric prince of knowledge, of fate, of the unknown. His entire existence is organized around collecting information that other beings cannot access. The Elder Scrolls, in this theory, are his greatest project, not prophecy, infrastructure. Every time someone reads a scroll, something reads them back. The eyes in Apocrypha never close. They have been open since the first scroll came into existence. Everything written in them flows back to the same place. The Dragonborn is a rare thing, a mortal born with the soul of a dragon, the ability to absorb dragon souls and use the Thu'um with natural ease. Throughout Elder Scrolls history, there have been several Dragonborn, not just the player character in Skyrim. Tiber Septim was dragonborn. Others before him were as well. Some fans believe the pattern of dragonborn appearances is not random. They believe every dragonborn in history was steered toward their role by Hermaeus Mora. The theory does not say Mora created the dragonborn. It says he identified them early and arranged circumstances around them to ensure they ended up where he needed them. Each dragonborn encountered knowledge-specific, rare, powerful knowledge at key moments in their lives. Moments that pushed them forward, that shaped their path. Those moments, in this theory, were not coincidence. They were arranged, small pieces of information, placed in the right location, at the right time. A book left in a library. A rumor passed through the right person. A dream at the right age. Mora does not need to appear to guide someone. He only needs to know what they will respond to. And knowing what people will respond to is precisely what he does. The Dragonborn thinks they chose their path. Mora watched them choose it. He may have built the path first. The Black Books are artifacts found on Solstheim in the Dragonborn DLC. They are tomes of immense power. Reading them pulls the reader directly into Apocrypha Mora's realm. Inside, they can gain powerful abilities, forbidden knowledge, insights that cannot be found anywhere else. Mora presents this as a gift. Some fans believe it is a trap. The theory holds that every time someone reads a black book and enters Apocrypha, they leave something behind. Not intentionally, not visibly, but real. A copy of their memories. An impression of everything they know, everything they have experienced, everything they are, transferred permanently into Mora's collection. The reader leaves with new knowledge, but they also leave something they cannot see leaving. This would mean that everyone who has ever read a black book, and there have been many over the centuries, not just the player, has unknowingly contributed to Mora's archive, has added themselves to his library, has become, in some small way, part of what Apocrypha holds. Some fans point to the way Mora speaks about mortals who enter his realm. He does not threaten them. He observes them, studies them. He seems genuinely interested in what they will do next, because they are interesting to him, because they are new volumes in a collection that never stops growing. The black books sit on Solstheim. They wait. They are very patient. They have always been patient. Mirak was the first dragonborn, confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. He served the dragon cult in ancient times. He then turned against the dragons. He fled to Apocrypha and made a deal with Hermaeus Mora to stay hidden and protected for thousands of years. Eventually, Mirak tried to break free from Mora, to return to Tamriel, to reclaim a role in the world. He failed. Mora turned on him, and the player character had to finish what Mora started. Some fans believe Mirak's rebellion was never a real rebellion. They believe it was a test. The theory holds that Mora engineered the entire sequence. He gave Mirak just enough freedom to believe he could escape. He allowed the plan to develop to a certain point. He watched every decision Mirak made and recorded everything he learned about mortal ambition, mortal desperation, and the specific way a dragonborn behaves when they believe they have no other options. The player character arriving and defeating Mirak was not an interruption of Mora's plans. It was the conclusion of them. Mora got everything he needed from Mirak's long wait and short rebellion, and the player character, in winning, demonstrated their own capabilities, their own patterns and responses for Mora to add to his collection. Both Dragonborn entered Apocrypha. Both left something behind. One of them did not leave at all. The Ogma Infinium is one of the most powerful books in Elder Scrolls lore. It appears in multiple games. Reading it grants enormous increases to skills and abilities. It is described as a tome of knowledge compiled by Hermaeus Mora and given to the sage Xerxes as a reward. Some fans believe the Ogma Infinium is not a book of knowledge. They believe it is something stranger. The theory holds that the Ogma Infinium is a piece of Mora himself, a fragment of his consciousness given physical form. Reading it does not just provide information. It opens a direct channel between the reader's mind and the deepest part of Apocrypha. The skills gained from reading the Ogma Infinium do not come from the words on the page. They come from the direct experience of briefly touching Mora's mind. The reader absorbs capability the same way they might absorb heat by standing near a fire. But the channel runs both ways. What the reader gains from the Ogma Infinium, Mora gains from the reader. A full and detailed impression of the mortal mind at the moment of contact. The book has passed through many hands across many eras. Each reader left their impression in it. Each one became, for a moment, an open page. Mora is very old. He has collected a very great deal, and the Ogma Infinium is the most direct method he has ever devised. Hermaeus Mora does not appear in many places in Skyrim directly. He communicates through the Black Books. He appears briefly in the Dragonborn DLC. He is present in older Elder Scrolls games in limited ways. But some fans believe he is present in Skyrim in a way that is never announced. The theory centers on the Arcaneum, the library at the College of Winterhold. Urag Groshub, the orc librarian, guards a collection of books that is unusually complete for a college in a remote northern province. Some of those books describe events and knowledge that should not be accessible to anyone in Skyrim at that time. Some fans believe the Arcaneum's collection did not grow naturally. Books appeared in it that no one purchased or donated. Texts arrived that no one requested. Mora, in this theory, has been quietly stocking libraries across Tamriel for centuries. Not to help the readers, to watch what they do with specific pieces of information, to see which books get read, which questions get asked, which directions mortal curiosity moves when given the right material. The College of Winterhold is one of his reading rooms. The students and professors are his subjects. None of them know they are being studied. Urag Groshub is not in on it. He simply keeps the books in good condition. That is all Mora needs from him. Knowledge is Hermaeus Mora's domain. But some fans believe the knowledge he collects is not the point. The collection itself is the point. There is a theory that Mora is not trying to learn anything specific. He already knows nearly everything knowable. What he is doing is something different. He is building a record. A complete and permanent record of everything that has ever happened in every era of Tamriel's history. Not to use it, not to act on it, simply to have it. Because Mora understands something that mortals do not. Events fade, civilizations disappear, languages die, memories dissolve. Eventually, every empire that ever stood will leave nothing behind, not even ruins, because the ruins will eventually crumble too. Mora is building a place where nothing is lost, a library that will outlast the world it documents. Whether that is generosity or possession depends on how you think about it. The shelves of Apocrypha go further than any mortal has walked. The ink moves in the dark, the eyes watch and record, and somewhere in that endless collection, every significant moment of Tamriel's history is preserved exactly as it happened. Whether anyone will ever read it, whether anyone will survive long enough, is a different question entirely. The seekers and lurkers that guard Apocrypha are Mora's servants. They attack intruders. They protect the books. They move through the realm with a purpose that is clearly organized. Some fans believe the seekers are not creatures. They are former scholars. The theory holds that certain mortals who entered Apocrypha and stayed too long were gradually absorbed into the realm, not killed, changed. Their mortal form dissolved and was replaced by something that suited Mora's needs better. Something that could exist permanently in his realm without the limitations of a mortal body. They retained their intelligence, their ability to read, their organizational instincts, and those instincts, redirected entirely toward maintaining Mora's library, made them into the entities players encounter in Apocrypha. They are not guarding the knowledge from people who should not have it. They are guarding it from people who might remove it, take it away, carry it out of Apocrypha, and put it somewhere that Mora cannot access. That, to Mora, is the only real theft, not reading his collection, taking from it. The seekers move quietly through the stacks. Their hands are always near the books. They have been in there long enough that they no longer remember what they were before. Mora's realm is called Apocrypha. The word means hidden writings, texts that were removed from the official record, suppressed, declared not to exist. Some fans believe the name is not metaphorical. They believe Apocrypha literally contains the hidden writings of Tamriel's history, not copies. The originals. The texts that were removed from libraries and burned and erased from public record across every era. Every time a ruler destroyed a book to protect their reputation, that book appeared in Apocrypha. Every time a religious order burned a text that contradicted their theology, Mora had the original. Every time a historian was ordered to rewrite events, the first draft was in Mora's library. Apocrypha is the complete record that every empire and every religion spent centuries trying to prevent from existing. It exists anyway. It has always existed. This is the theory that some fans find most unsettling about Mora. Not his power, not his manipulation, but his patience. He did not fight the suppressions. He did not intervene when books were burned. He simply waited and collected what was removed. Every secret kept, every truth buried, every history rewritten, all of it sitting on his shelves in the dark. The history of Tamriel has two versions, the one in the libraries and the one in Apocrypha. Hermaeus Mora does not experience time the way mortals do. He is a Daedric prince. He exists beside time rather than inside it. He has no beginning that he remembers and no end that he expects. Some fans believe this is the real source of his power, not his knowledge, his patience. Mora can wait. He can wait longer than any mortal civilization can maintain a secret. He can wait longer than any empire can hold its borders. He can wait longer than any religion can keep its texts suppressed. Everything that mortals hide, they hide temporarily. Eventually, the civilization falls. The temple crumbles. The library floods. The secret keeper dies and takes the secret to a grave that does not stay closed forever. Mora is still there afterward. He was there before. He will be there after. The theory holds that Mora's plan, if it can be called a plan, is simply to outlast everything, to be the last one holding the complete record when everything else is gone. He is not in a hurry. He has never been in a hurry. The eyes in Apocrypha watch and record. The ink moves. The shelves go on forever. And Hermaeus Mora sits at the center of it all, reading. He has been reading for a very long time. Hermaeus Mora does not announce himself. He does not declare his intentions. He offers knowledge, and he waits to see what mortals do with it. That patience is the most important thing to understand about him. He is not cruel. He is not kind. He is simply thorough. Every dragonborn, every scholar, every desperate mortal who opened a black book in the hope of finding something that would help them, all of them passed through his realm and left their impression behind. The collection grows. The eyes stay open. And somewhere in the endless dark of Apocrypha, the shelves keep stretching further. In the early First Era, and in the long ages before it, the dragons did not hide. They flew over Skyrim in open skies. They landed on mountains and spoke to the Nords below them. They were not just powerful, they were in charge. And the people who managed the relationship between dragons and mortals were the dragon priests. Most players encounter dragon priests as enemies, powerful undead sorcerers in ancient masks, waiting in ruins. But long before the ruins, there were living men and women who chose to serve the dragons. Willingly, completely. Why someone would do that is a more complicated question than it first appears. Dragon priests are described in official lore as servants of the dragons, men and women who managed the day-to-day rule of Nordic society on behalf of their dragon masters. They collected tribute. They enforced the dragon's will. They maintained the temples. Some fans believe that description is incomplete. They believe the dragon priests were not servants at all. They were partners. The theory holds that the relationship between the highest-ranking dragon priests and the most powerful dragons was one of mutual benefit and mutual respect. The dragons could not manage a human civilization alone. They did not understand mortals well enough. They needed intermediaries, people who could translate dragon will into human terms. The dragon priests provided that. In exchange, they received something no ordinary mortal could access. The dragons taught them things, real things, deep knowledge about the Thuum, about the nature of souls, about the way time and language connect in the dragon tongue. The priests were not just servants who happened to live near power. They were scholars in a system that gave them access to knowledge beyond anything their civilization could produce independently. Serving the dragons was a choice. It was also an education. The masks worn by dragon priests are among the most recognizable objects in Skyrim. Each one is unique. Each one belongs to a specific, named priest. They are ancient, crafted from materials that have survived thousands of years, and in gameplay terms, they are exceptionally powerful. Some fans believe the masks are not ceremonial. They are functional in a way that the game only partly explains. The theory holds that each dragon priest mask was designed to store the consciousness of the priest wearing it, not as a backup, as a primary function. The mask was a vessel. When the priest died, something of who they were, their knowledge, their will, their sense of self, transferred into the mask rather than passing on normally. This would explain why the dragon priests are so difficult to destroy permanently. You can defeat the body, but the mask remains. And inside the mask, something is still present, still watching, still holding on to what it was. Some fans extend this theory to suggest that the dragon priests chose this design deliberately. They built their own continuation into their equipment. The priests who planned for defeat created a form of existence that could survive the dragon war, survive the ruin of their temples, survive thousands of years of burial, and still be present when someone finally came back. The masks wait in the crypts. They have been waiting for a very long time. The faces on them do not change. The Thuum, the voice, the shout, is the most powerful force in Nordic culture. The ability to shape reality through spoken words. It is the gift of the dragons, and in the time of the dragon cult, certain mortals learned to use it. Some fans believe that knowledge was strictly controlled, that the dragon cult deliberately kept the Thuum out of common hands. The theory holds that the dragon priests maintained a monopoly on knowledge of the voice. They taught it to no one outside their own ranks. Common Nords who showed talent were quietly redirected, given other roles, other honors, other reasons not to pursue the one thing they were naturally drawn to. The reason, in this theory, was not cruelty, it was self-preservation. A society where many people could use the Thuum would be very difficult to control. The dragon cult's authority rested on being the only mortals with access to dragon power. Share that access, and you share the authority. This is why the Greybeards, the monks who practice the voice in the Fourth Era, live in isolation at the top of the world. They carry a tradition of knowledge that was deliberately suppressed for thousands of years. The few who learned it outside the cult's control had to go somewhere the cult could not easily follow. The voice was always meant for more people than it reached. The cult made sure of that. The Dragon War ended the dragon cult. The Nords rose against the dragons. The dragon priests who served them were swept away, killed, driven into hiding, or sealed in their temples by the force of the rebellion. But some fans believe certain dragon priests knew the war was coming long before it arrived, and they prepared for it. The theory holds that the most powerful dragon priests began the process of becoming undead, of anchoring themselves to the physical world through magical means before the dragon war ended, not after, before. This preparation required a specific kind of decision. It meant choosing, while still alive, to give up a natural death, to bind your soul to a place, to accept an existence that would be long and cold and entirely unlike what you had built your life around. Some fans believe the dragon priests made this choice because they had knowledge the common Nords did not. They could see what the rebellion was building toward, and they decided that existing in an undead state, locked in their temples, surrounded by their draug, holding their masks, was better than being part of a civilization that was about to collapse. They did not fight the dragon war seriously. They waited it out. By the time the last dragon fell, certain dragon priests were already settled in for a very long wait. The Dwemer and the dragon cult existed in the same era. The first era and the late Merethic, before it saw both civilizations operating in Tamriel at the same time. They were aware of each other. The Dwemer had cities in Skyrim. The dragon cult had temples across the same land. Some fans believe they had more than geographic proximity. They believe there was a connection. The theory holds that certain dragon priests maintained a quiet relationship with Dwemer scholars, not an alliance, not a friendship, a professional exchange. The dragon priests had knowledge of the Thuum and dragon soul mechanics. The Dwemer had technology and metallurgical expertise that no other civilization could match. Some fans point to the dragon priest masks as evidence. The craftsmanship required to make objects of that quality, that durability, that magical density is beyond what most ancient Nordic culture could produce. The materials and methods suggest influence from a civilization that was very good at building things that lasted. The Dwemer, in return, may have received information about soul mechanics from the dragon priests. The Dwemer were deeply interested in souls, in using them, in reshaping them. The dragon priests, who interacted with dragon souls regularly, would have had knowledge the Dwemer could not develop independently. The two civilizations shared a landscape for centuries. Some fans believe they also shared more than that, quietly, without telling anyone. The greybeards of High Hrothgar are the keepers of the voice in the Fourth Era. They sit at the top of the throat of the world and speak only rarely. They have maintained their isolation for generations. They teach the Thuum to those who are called. Some fans believe the greybeards are the last surviving institution of the dragon cult, not in the sense that they worship dragons, in the sense that they carry a tradition that began inside the cult and never fully ended. The knowledge they hold, the methods of learning the voice, the structure of the practice, the specific understanding of how a shout works, comes from somewhere. It did not appear from nothing after the Dragon War. Some fans believe it was preserved by dragon priests who defected, who saw what the cult was becoming and chose to carry the knowledge forward in a different form, a quieter form, one built around personal practice and isolation rather than political power. High Hrothgar is very old. The stones in its walls predate the current institution by a long margin. Something was on that mountain before the greybeards arrived. The tradition they carry is older than they present it. The knowledge has been passing from teacher to student for longer than any current member knows. And at the beginning of that chain, someone was wearing a mask. Alduin is the World Eater, the firstborn of Akatosh, the dragon who was meant to end the current age of the world and begin the next one. This is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. The dragon priests served the dragons. They served Alduin's hierarchy, whether they knew it consciously or not. Some fans believe that the dragon priests understood Alduin's true purpose and that some of them approved of it. The theory holds that the inner circle of the dragon cult had access to information about Alduin that common Nords did not. They knew he was not just a powerful dragon. They knew what he was designed to do. And certain priests, the most dedicated and the most philosophically committed, believed that Alduin's world-ending function was correct, that the current age should end, that what came after would be better, or at least different, and that serving the mechanism of that change was the highest possible purpose. These priests did not just serve the dragons because it gave them power. They served because they believed in the destination. The Dragon War was, to them, not a rebellion. It was a mistake. Mortals turning away from the natural order of ages because they were afraid of change. The priests who went undead in their temples were not waiting for anything in particular. They were waiting to see if the world would eventually correct itself. Alduin's return in the Fourth Era, in this theory, would have felt to them like a confirmation, not a threat, an answer. Dragon priest names in Skyrim all carry a specific quality: Volsung, Morake, Ragot, Otar. They are not Nordic names. They are closer to dragon language, to the Thuum itself. Each name contains sounds that appear in known dragon words. Some fans believe dragon priests took these names deliberately, as part of their commitment to the cult and to the dragons they served. The theory holds that a dragon priest's original name, whatever they were called before joining the cult, was retired at a specific point in their training, replaced with a name in the dragon tongue, a name that carried meaning in the language of the voice. This was not just symbolic. In the world of the Thuum, where spoken words have real power, having a name that is also a dragon language word creates a connection, a resonance. The priest's identity becomes, in some small way, part of the language that shapes reality. The masks carry those names. The ruins carry those names. 4,000 years after the priests who bore them last walked under an open sky, those names are still in use, still spoken. In the language of the Thuum, that is not nothing. Names that are still spoken are names that still have weight. The inner sanctums of dragon priest temples are always deep, multiple levels, multiple locked doors. The most valuable materials, always at the bottom, furthest from the entrance. Some fans believe those inner rooms were not treasure vaults, they were working laboratories. The theory holds that dragon priests spent their time in those inner rooms conducting experiments, research into soul mechanics, into the properties of the Thuum, into the relationship between dragon souls and mortal ones. The sealed chambers were designed to keep outside noise and interference out, not to protect valuables, but to protect ongoing work. The Draugr that fill dragon priest ruins are also part of this theory. They are not just guards, they are former subjects, individuals who agreed or were assigned to participate in the dragon priest's experiments and did not come through the process as full mortals. The process that turns a person into a Draugr was not accidental. It was developed, refined, over many generations of practice by priests who had a very long time and very little outside distraction. The inner sanctums are quiet now, dusty. The experiments ended thousands of years ago, but the subjects are still there, still functioning at a reduced level, still carrying out the last instructions they were given. The last confirmed dragon priest to be active, in the sense of pursuing a real agenda rather than just defending a territory, is Mirak. But Mirak is a special case. He fled to Apocrypha before the Dragon War ended. He did not go undead in the normal way. Some fans believe there is at least one dragon priest whose fate is entirely unknown. The theory is simple. There were many dragon priests. Their temples have been catalogued and their masks collected, but the number of priests documented does not fully account for every individual who held that rank across the long span of the cult's existence. Some fans believe one at minimum is unaccounted for, not dead, not sealed in a temple, not in Apocrypha, simply gone from the record. A dragon priest who survived by not being found, who learned from watching the cult fall that the best way to continue was to become invisible to history, who has been present in Tamriel in some form for thousands of years, carrying knowledge that no other surviving individual holds. Where they are, what they have been doing, whether they are still working towards something or simply waiting, the theory has no answers, just the absence of an account. The first era left many things unresolved. Some of them resolved themselves quietly over the centuries that followed. Others are simply still open. The first era moved on. The dragons were gone from the open sky. The priests were sealed in their tombs or simply stopped. The temples stood empty, and the knowledge that had flowed between dragons and their most devoted servants slowly compressed into dust and locked doors and forgotten rooms deep below the surface. The masks are still there. The names are still carved into stone. Something of what the dragon priests were is preserved in those objects. Patient, cold, and waiting. Whether that patience has a purpose or just a habit by now is something the ruins do not say clearly. In the first era, The Dwemer were the most advanced civilization in Tamriel. They built cities deep beneath the mountains. They built machines that still move today, thousands of years after the last Dwemer died or disappeared, depending on which theory you follow. They rejected every god. They trusted only what they could build and measure and test. And then, at a single moment, during the Battle of Red Mountain, every Dwemer in the world vanished at once. No bodies, no survivors, no explanation that everyone agrees on. What happened to the Dwemer is one of the oldest and most carefully studied mysteries in all of Elder Scrolls lore. The Battle of Red Mountain was a massive conflict in the First Era. The Dwemer and the Chimer ancestors of the Dunmer fought there along with the Nords who had allied with one side. At a specific moment in that battle, the Dwemer leader Kagranak activated something, his tools, the instruments he had built to interact with the heart of Lorkhan buried beneath Red Mountain. What happened next is confirmed. Every Dwemer in existence vanished simultaneously, across all of Tamriel, not just the ones at the battle. The most common fan theory holds that they were not killed, they were displaced. The theory says Kagranak's tools, when activated on the heart of Lorkhan, did not do what Kagranak intended. They were meant to grant the Dwemer immortality, to remove their souls from the normal cycle of death and rebirth, and anchor them permanently to something larger. Instead, they pulled every Dwemer out of the present moment and pushed them sideways through time. Not dead, not in Aetherius, somewhere else. A temporal space that has no clear address in any plane of existence that mortals can access. Some fans believe the Dwemer are still there, unchanged, frozen in a moment that has no before or after, waiting for a mechanism that would bring them back, a mechanism that Kagranak built into the original design and that no one has successfully activated since. The ruins are quiet, the machines are still running. Something is keeping the power on in those halls, something with a reason to wait. The animunculi are the Dwemer automatons, the spheres, the centurions, the spiders. They move through Dwemer ruins in Skyrim, attacking intruders, maintaining systems, following patterns of behavior that were programmed into them thousands of years ago. Some fans believe the automatons are still running because they are not entirely empty. The theory holds that the Dwemer, in building their automatons, did not just program behavior, they transferred something of themselves into the machines. A fragment, a layer, not a full consciousness, not a complete person, but enough of a Dwemer mind to give the machine something more than instructions. This would explain why the automatons are so difficult to fool or redirect. Simple programming degrades and becomes predictable. But the Dwemer machines adapt. They respond to novel situations in ways that suggest something like reasoning. Some fans extend this theory to suggest that over the thousands of years since the Dwemer disappeared, those fragments have been slowly developing, growing, in whatever limited way a fragment in a machine can grow, accumulating experience, getting, very gradually, more complex. The automatons in Skyrim's ruins are not the same as they were when the Dwemer disappeared. They have had 4,000 years of continuous operation to become something else. What they are becoming, and whether any of them have crossed a line from machine behavior into something that deserves a different name, is something the ruins do not answer clearly. The Centurions move in the deep dark. They have been moving for a very long time. Kagranak was the chief craftsman of the Dwemer. His tools, Keening, Sunder, and Wraithguard, were built specifically to interact with the heart of Lorkhan. In confirmed lore, the tools were used to tap into the heart's power, to channel it, to direct it toward a specific purpose. That purpose is where the theories diverge. The official position is that Kagranak wanted to use the heart to make the Dwemer immortal, to remove their dependence on the gods they rejected and replace divine power with something they had built and controlled themselves. Some fans believe the goal was different. They believe Kagranak was not trying to harvest the heart's power. He was trying to replace it. The theory holds that Kagranak understood the heart of Lorkhan as the engine of Nirn, the thing keeping the world running, and he believed that engine was flawed. that the world was unstable in ways that would eventually become catastrophic. So he built tools not to use the heart's power, but to remove it entirely and install something else, something the Dwemer had built, a new engine, one without Lorcan's flaws. The disappearance, in this theory, was the moment the replacement failed, not from outside interference, from a fundamental incompatibility between what the Dwemer had built and what it was replacing. The world absorbed the failure. The Dwemer did not. Kagranak's tools are still in the world, still capable of interacting with the heart. Some fans believe the original plan is still theoretically possible. Someone would just need to understand what Kagranak was actually trying to do. Dwemer ruins are spread across Tamriel. Skyrim has them. Morrowind has them. Other regions have them. And while the surface geography between those ruins is varied and vast, the underground tells a different story. Some fans believe the Dwemer ruins are not isolated structures. They are connected. The theory holds that the Dwemer built a network of underground passages, linking their major installations, not roads, tunnels, sealed, pressurized, and navigable by their automatons at minimum, possibly also by Dwemer themselves, before they disappeared. This network has never been fully mapped. Most of it has not been mapped at all. The known entrances are hidden or sealed. The passages run at depths below what most surface expeditions can reach. Some fans believe the network is still intact, that the tunnels did not collapse when the Dwemer disappeared, because they were built to outlast anything their builders could imagine happening. If the automatons are still running, and if the automatons use the network to move between ruins, then the Dwemer infrastructure is not a collection of separate sites. It is one connected system, still operating, still maintained, moving resources and information between installations that no mortal currently knows are in communication with each other. The separate ruins of Skyrim may be less separate than they appear. Beneath the rock, in the sealed dark, the network continues its old routines. The Daedric princes are not on record as having been involved with the Dwemer. The Dwemer rejected all divine beings, equally Aedra and Daedra, both. They had no temples to Daedric princes, no known cult activity, no recorded interactions. Some fans believe that record was edited. The theory holds that, at some point in the Dwemer's history, not near the end, but earlier, during a period when they were still developing their theological position, one Dwemer scholar made contact with a Daedric prince, specifically with a prince whose domain touched on knowledge, or on time, or on the mechanics of existence itself. The contact was brief, or it appeared brief, and whatever was exchanged in that contact, whatever knowledge the Dwemer received and whatever the prince received in return, was afterward removed from all Dwemer records. Not poorly hidden, thoroughly removed, as though the Dwemer committed enormous resources to making certain that specific event did not appear in any text. The prince's name is not in any theory that has a strong following. Some fans say Hermaeus Mora, some say Nocturnal, some say a prince whose name the Dwemer may have been the only mortals to know, and who does not appear in any other context. The Dwemer spent their entire civilization insisting the gods did not matter. Some fans believe that insistence was a little too thorough to be entirely philosophical. Yagrum Bagan is the last living Dwemer. He appears in the Elder Scrolls III, Morrowind, living in isolation, suffering from a disease called Corpus. He survived the disappearance of his people because he was outside of Mundus in an outer realm when it happened. He does not know what caused the disappearance. This is confirmed. Some fans find that very difficult to believe. The theory holds that Yagrum Bagan knows exactly what happened to the Dwemer, or knows enough to have worked it out in the thousands of years since, given that he is one of the most technically knowledgeable individuals who has ever lived. He simply does not say. When asked, in the game, he gives his genuine uncertainty. Some fans believe that uncertainty is a performance. That Yagrum, for reasons of his own, has decided that the truth of what happened to his people is not information he is going to share. perhaps because sharing it would make it possible for someone to reverse the disappearance. And Yagrum has spent his long isolation deciding whether reversal is something he actually wants. A civilization that vanished all at once, in a single moment, left no one behind to decide whether they should come back, except for one person, slowly getting sicker, sitting in a corner of Morrowind, thinking about it for an age. Whatever Yagrum has concluded, he has kept it to himself. The heart of Lorcan still exists in the world of Elder Scrolls lore, or it did, until the events of Morrowind. Its presence beneath Red Mountain had effects on the surrounding land for thousands of years. The Tribunal, Vivek, Almalexia, and Sotha Sil used Kagranak's tools to tap into its power and make themselves into gods. Some fans believe the Dwemer's disappearance was not a failure of Kagranak's plan. It was a deliberate act by the heart itself. The theory holds that the heart of Lorcan is not a passive object. It is aware. It is a fragment of a being who had intentions, who made decisions, who planned for contingencies. And when Kagranak activated his tools against it, the heart responded. Not with power, with rejection. Every Dwemer in this theory was erased from the present moment, not because the tools failed, but because the heart refused them. It recognized what was being attempted, the replacement of Lorcan's contribution to creation with something the Dwemer had built, and it removed the people making the attempt from the equation. Not killed, rejected, pushed out of the moment, the way a body rejects something that does not belong inside it. The heart sat beneath Red Mountain for thousands of years after that. It did not appear threatened by what came next. The Tribunal used Kagranak's tools carefully, taking power without attempting replacement. The heart allowed that. The line the Dwemer crossed was a specific one. The heart knew exactly where it was. Some fans believe the Dwemer left something behind, deliberately, not their ruins, not their automatons, something smaller, a message. The theory holds that Kagranak, or another senior Dwemer scholar, at some point before the Battle of Red Mountain, understood that the plan might not succeed, and this individual, or a small group, encoded a record of what the Dwemer had actually been working toward, their real goals, their real findings, everything that the destruction of their civilization would otherwise erase. This record was not written in Dwemer script, not stored in a Dwemer ruin. It was hidden in an object or location that the Dwemer knew would survive indefinitely, something that other civilizations would preserve without understanding what they were preserving. Some fans point to specific objects in the games as candidates, others point to locations. The theory has many versions. What they share is the same core idea. The Dwemer knew they might fail. They were careful people. They planned for failure the way they planned for everything thoroughly and without sentiment. Somewhere in Tamriel, a record exists of what the Dwemer really were and what they were really doing. It has been sitting there for thousands of years, preserved by people who did not know what they had, waiting for someone who can read what it says. The Dwemer's ruins are the most technically advanced structures in all of Tamriel. Their machines still run, their traps still trigger, their locks still hold. No civilization since has built anything that functions with the same reliability after the same span of time. Some fans believe that reliability is not accidental, that Dwemer engineering was not just good, it was designed for a specific lifespan. The theory holds that Dwemer structures were built to last exactly long enough for the Dwemer to return, if return was possible, long enough to still be functional when someone, a Dwemer, or someone working toward returning them, finally needed them to be. The automatons are not just guards, they are maintenance staff. They are keeping the ruins ready, running the systems, ensuring that when the moment comes, everything is still in working order. The ruins are not monuments to a dead civilization. They are a civilization in standby mode, patient, maintained, waiting for an activation sequence that no one currently living knows how to enter. The machines keep running in the dark. They do not get tired. They do not wonder if anyone is coming. They simply continue what they were built to do. In the long quiet of the First Era, the Dwemer disappeared and the world moved on. New empires rose, new gods were worshipped, new histories were written. The ruins were explored, picked over, studied, and eventually used as dungeons by the people who came after. But the machines are still running, the tunnels are still sealed, the automatons are still moving through the halls on routines that have not changed in 4,000 years. Something in the deep places of Tamriel is still keeping time, still waiting, still functional and ready and patient in the dark. Whether anyone is ever coming back is the question the ruins cannot answer. But they are keeping the lights on in their way, just in case. In the First Era, before the Alessian Empire had a name, Cyrodiil was ruled by the Aelides. They called themselves the Heartland High Elves. They built cities of white stone. They kept humans as slaves. And for generations, those humans worked and suffered in a land that their masters treated as their permanent possession. Then a woman named Alessia decided that was not how the story would end. What followed was one of the most complex and quietly disturbing events in all of Elder Scrolls history. A rebellion that succeeded, a saint who paid a price that history has never fully named, and a warrior who should not have existed at all. Pellinor Whitestrake appeared during the Alessian slave rebellion. He fought alongside Alessia. He destroyed Aelide city after Aelide city with a violence that went beyond any military purpose. He spoke sometimes of things that had not happened. He seemed to lose track of where he was in time, and when the Aelides finally managed to capture and kill him, they found, inside him, something that was not flesh. The most well-known fan theory about Pellinor is that he was not from this time at all. He was a soldier from a future that was destroyed, a timeline that ended, a version of history that did not survive. In that destroyed future, something catastrophic happened, something so severe that certain individuals were scattered backward through time, untethered from any fixed point, landing in different eras. Pellinor landed in the First Era during the Slave Rebellion. He was not sent by the gods. He was lost. He kept fighting because fighting was all he knew. He kept killing Aelides because in his original timeline, or in the fragments of other timelines he caught glimpses of, the elves were always the enemy. The things inside him that were not flesh were technology from a future that no longer existed, carried backward through time, functioning in a world that had no framework to explain them. History called him a divine warrior, because the alternative was too strange to put in a temple. Alessia is the mother of the Alessian Empire, the first empress of Cyrodiil, a saint in the divine religion. Her name is still spoken in temples in the Fourth Era. The official story is that she prayed to the gods for help and received it, that Akatosh heard her and sent Pellinor to fight alongside her, that her faith was rewarded and her people were freed. Some fans believe the real story involves a negotiation that cost Alessia everything she did not know she was offering. The theory holds that Alessia did not petition the gods as a supplicant, asking for mercy. She bargained. She had something the gods needed specifically, the potential of a mortal bloodline that could serve as a bridge between the divine and the mortal world. And she traded access to that bloodline in exchange for help. The Amulet of Kings, the artifact that would be carried by every legitimate ruler of Cyrodiil for millennia, was not a gift. It was a binding agreement, a contract made physical. The bloodline of Alessia was pledged to a specific divine purpose, and the amulet was the mark of that pledge. Every ruler who wore it was not wearing a crown. They were wearing proof of a deal that Alessia made for her people, without being able to explain the full terms to anyone who came after. The deal lasted for thousands of years. Alessia did not live to see all of what she had agreed to. The Alessian rebellion freed the human slaves of Cyrodiil from Aelid rule. It was successful. It produced a new empire. It changed the shape of Tamriel permanently. Some fans believe the rebellion was not spontaneous. They believe it was designed. Specifically, they believe Akatosh engineered the conditions for the rebellion centuries before it happened, because Akatosh needed something that only a specific kind of historical event could produce. The theory holds that Akatosh needed a mortal bloodline bound to dragon power, not metaphorically, literally, a family line with a genuine, functional connection to the divine aspect of dragonkind, the same aspect that Akatosh himself embodies. To create that bloodline, a specific moment was required, a moment of genuine spiritual extremity, where a mortal reached toward the divine in complete sincerity, with complete sacrifice, at a point of absolute necessity. That moment was Alessia's prayer. Akatosh arranged the conditions that made the rebellion necessary. He allowed the Aelid situation to develop to the point where a human would reach out in desperation, with enough genuine weight behind the request to allow the binding. The dragon souls that would later appear in Dragonborn heroes, from Remen Cyrodiil to Tiber Septim to the player character in Skyrim, trace their origin to this one moment, to one woman, praying in a field. Akatosh knew that moment was coming. He made sure the conditions were right. Pelinal's behavior during the rebellion was not entirely directed by Alessia or by any clear military strategy. He would go into states that witnesses described as something beyond normal combat rage. He destroyed Aelid's cities completely. Men, women, architecture, everything. He did things that Alessia had to ask him to stop. He spoke during these states about events and people and places that no one around him recognized. Some fans believe this behavior was not rage, it was temporal displacement. The theory builds on the idea that Pelinal existed across multiple points in time simultaneously. He was physically in the First Era, fighting Aelids, but fragments of his awareness kept slipping to other timelines, other eras, where different versions of similar conflicts were happening. When Pelinal fought with that excessive violence, he was not just fighting the Aelids in front of him, he was fighting the enemies from 4 or 5 different timelines at once, all of them layered over his vision, all of them equally real to him in that moment. The references he made to events that had not happened were not prophecy. They were memory. Memory from futures that had already occurred in other branches of time that only Pelinal could see. This made him an extraordinary weapon. He brought the violence of multiple wars to a single battlefield, and it made him completely unreliable as a person. He was barely present in any single moment. Alessia kept him pointed at the right targets as best she could. Some days that was enough. The Amulet of Kings has a long history in Elder Scrolls lore. It was worn by the Alessian emperors, then by the Remen emperors, then by the Septim emperors. It was central to the Oblivion crisis. Martin Septim destroyed it to stop Mehrunes Dagon, ending the line of Dragonborn emperors permanently. Its origin, in confirmed lore, is the covenant between Alessia and Akatosh. Some fans believe the amulet was not given, it was placed. The theory holds that the Amulet of Kings is a control mechanism, not for the Daedra that is its confirmed function, keeping Oblivion sealed, but for the bloodline that carries it. Each ruler who wore the amulet was not just protected by it, they were connected to it in a way that made certain actions possible and others unavailable. Rulers who tried to do things that violated the terms of Alessia's original covenant found those actions blocked, not by other people, by circumstances, by the way events arranged themselves, by an invisible hand that kept the bloodline where Akatosh needed it. The emperors believed they ruled by divine right. Some fans believe they ruled by divine leash. The length of that leash was the amulet. When Martin destroyed it, he did not just close the Oblivion gate, he severed the connection. Every Dragonborn who came after existed without the amulet's guidance and its constraints. Alessia agreed to terms she could not fully read. The amulet made sure her descendants kept those terms, whether they understood them or not. The Aelids are mostly gone. Their cities were destroyed or abandoned over the First Era as human power grew and elven power faded. But they did not all die immediately with the rebellion's success. Some fans believe the Aelid survivors played a longer game than history records. The theory holds that certain Aelid lords, those who saw the rebellion coming early enough, began integrating into human society before the end. They adopted human names. They obscured their elven heritage. They used the longer Aelid lifespan to outlast the immediate political upheaval and wait for a moment when they could re-establish influence quietly. These individuals were not fighting against the new empire. They were operating inside it, advising, administering, shaping policy from positions that history would record as belonging to humans. Some fans believe traces of this infiltration are visible in the patterns of early Alessian policy, particularly in the way the Alessian Order, which officially despised the elves, somehow preserved an enormous amount of Aelid, architectural and magical knowledge that should have been destroyed. Someone saved it. Someone inside the Order who knew what it was worth. Whether those individuals were hidden Aelids or simply humans who had learned from them before the rebellion is something the record does not clarify. The distinction may not have been clear to people at the time either. Umaril the Unfeathered was an Aelid king who fought Pelinal directly. He was defeated by Pelinal, but he had made arrangements with the Daedric prince Meridia that allowed his soul to survive in Meridia's realm. He returned in the Fourth Era during the events of the Knights of the Nine DLC. Some fans believe Umaril's arrangement with Meridia tells us something important about Aelid culture more broadly. The theory holds that the Aelid relationship with the Daedric princes was not just political or religious. It was structural. The Aelids had built their civilization around specific Daedric alliances in ways that were much more integrated than any other culture in Tamriel. Certain Aelid cities were not just built to honor Daedric princes. They were built as physical expressions of those princes' realms, places where the boundary between Mundus and the Oblivion realm of a specific prince was deliberately thinned. This gave the Aelids power that other elves and all humans struggled to match. But it also meant that their civilization was not entirely their own. Parts of it belonged to the princes who had agreements with it. When the Alessian rebellion destroyed Aelid power, it did not fully destroy those Daedric connections. It just removed the Aelids who were managing them. The thin places in the boundary between Mundus and Oblivion remained. They are still there in Cyrodiil, unmanaged, unguarded. Old agreements between dead civilizations and eternal beings do not expire cleanly. They simply go unattended. Morihaus was the divine bull, a figure from First Era mythology who fought alongside Alessia and Pelinal. He is described as the son of Kine and one of the earliest Breath of Kine figures. He and Alessia were, by some accounts, together in some capacity. Some fans believe Morihaus was not mythological. They believe he was a real being, not fully mortal, not fully divine, who existed in the First Era, and whose nature has been gradually softened into symbol and legend because the reality was too difficult to categorize. The theory holds that Morihaus was one of the early Aedric influences on the mortal world. Not a full god, a fragment, a piece of Kine's aspect given enough physical form to act directly. He was in the world because Kine needed a presence in the rebellion that could operate in the physical world without the limitations that fully divine beings faced. Pelinal fought with Akatosh's aspect behind him, even if that aspect was carried in a time-broken soldier. Morihaus was Kine's investment in the same event. Alessia, in this theory, was not just a mortal who prayed and received help. She was the axis point around which multiple divine interventions were organized. Multiple gods had reasons to want the rebellion to succeed, and each one sent or placed something in the conflict. She did not know how many pieces were moving around her. She only knew her own part. The rebellion succeeded. The empire was founded. Alessia became the first empress and eventually a saint. The Aelids faded from power over the following centuries. Pelinal was gone. Morihaus stepped back from history. and the First Era continued on its long way through wars and kingdoms and the slow movement of empires. But some fans find the aftermath of the rebellion quietly strange. For an event that changed the shape of Tamriel permanently, very little of what happened during it has been clearly recorded. The theory is simple. The people who won the rebellion controlled what was written about it, and the things that were written were chosen carefully. The divine deals, the full cost, the nature of Pelinal, the terms of the amulet, the specifics of Alessia's prayer and what was said in return. All of it exists in fragments, in texts that contradict each other, in accounts that agree on the broad outline and disagree on every detail that would reveal the full nature of what happened. This is not what honest history looks like. This is what managed history looks like. Someone, after the rebellion, made very deliberate decisions about what the world would be allowed to know, and they were good at their work. Thousands of years later, the managed version is what most people still believe. The First Era kept moving. Empires rose above the foundations that the rebellion had built. The names of the rebellion's participants became holy, their deeds became scripture, and the complicated, contradictory, deeply strange reality of what actually happened in those years was gradually simplified into something that fit inside a temple and could be taught to children. That process is very old, and very effective, and very quiet. Alessia prayed in a field. Something answered, and the terms of that answer are still in the world, in objects and bloodlines, and sealed agreements between mortals and beings who do not experience time the way mortals do. Whatever she gave it up completely. The world she made for her people stood for thousands of years. Whether she knew the full price when she agreed to pay it is something the official stories have never answered clearly. There is no era for this, no empire, no war, no specific century where this began or ended. Soul trapping has been happening in Tamriel for as long as mortals have known how to do it, and somewhere outside of normal time and normal space, the souls that were caught are still there. The soul cairn does not appear on any map of the planes of oblivion that scholars consider complete. It sits at the edge of what is known, cold, flat, filled with the dim shapes of things that used to be people. What happens to a soul after it is caught is one of the quietest and least comfortable questions in all of Elder Scrolls lore. Soul gems are common objects in Skyrim. They sit in shops. They fill dungeon chests. Mages carry them. Enchanters use them constantly. They come in different sizes: petty, lesser, common, greater, grand, and each size holds a different strength of soul. The official explanation is simple. A soul gem stores a soul. The soul powers an enchantment. The gem breaks. The process is clean and functional. Some fans believe the process is not clean at all. They believe soul gems do not store souls the way a jar stores water. They consume them, slowly. From the moment of capture, the gem begins breaking the soul down, not destroying it, digesting it, reducing it from a full identity, a person, a creature, a being with a history, into something simpler, something that can be used as fuel. By the time an enchanter opens that gem, what comes out is not the soul that went in. It is what is left after the gem has been working on it. An echo, a residue of energy that used to be organized into a self. This theory would explain why soul gems have a shelf presence in the world, why they feel slightly wrong to handle in large quantities, why certain mages in lore express discomfort around them that goes beyond practical concerns. The soul is not waiting inside a gem. It is dissolving, quietly, in the dark. The soul cairn is a plane of existence, a realm that players visit in the Dawnguard DLC. It is cold and grey and enormous. The sky is permanent twilight. Souls wander it without purpose. The ideal masters rule it, beings made entirely of crystallized soul energy, who traded away their mortal forms long ago to become something permanent. The official classification puts the soul cairn among the planes of oblivion, a Daedric realm, like Sovngarde or the Deadlands or Cold Harbor. Some fans believe that classification is wrong. They believe the soul cairn is not a Daedric realm. It is a prison that grew large enough to be mistaken for one. The theory holds that the soul cairn began as something much smaller, a space created by the ideal masters who were once mortal mages to hold the souls they collected. Not a realm, a vault, a contained space with no natural size limit, because souls take up no physical space, and the ideal masters had no reason to set a boundary. As more souls entered, the space expanded to accommodate them. Centuries passed. The vault became a region. The region became a plane. And a plane that has always existed, that has defined rulers, that appears on no other being's territory, that is what scholars call a Daedric realm. The soul cairn earned its classification by growing into it. It was not made to be a realm. It became one because it was never given a ceiling. The ideal masters did not plan to rule a plane of existence. They planned to collect. The scale of what they built surprised even them. Enchanted objects are everywhere in Skyrim. Weapons that deal extra fire damage, armor that reduces the cost of spells, rings that make you harder to detect. All of them powered, at some point, by a soul trapped in a gem and released into the object during the enchanting process. Some fans believe the release is not complete. They believe something of the soul stays in the object after the enchanting is finished. The theory holds that when a soul is used to power an enchantment, the energy of that soul does not distribute evenly through the object. It anchors, and the part that anchors carries the most organized piece of the soul that survived the gem, the fragment that was most strongly itself, the piece that held the most identity before the gem broke it down. This fragment cannot think, cannot act, cannot communicate in any normal sense, but it persists inside the enchanted object as a faint presence, a memory of a personality embedded in metal or leather or stone. Some fans extend this to suggest that objects enchanted with strong souls, grand souls, the souls of powerful beings, carry stronger fragments, that an ancient weapon enchanted thousands of years ago with a grand soul might carry something inside it that has been developing very slowly over all that time. The old enchanted weapons of Skyrim are very old. The souls in them went in a long time ago. Whatever is left of those souls has had a great deal of time to do whatever a fragment can do in the quiet dark of an old blade. Falion is a mage who lives in Morthal. He is one of the few people in Skyrim who can cure vampirism. His method involves a filled black soul gem and a ritual he conducts at a summoning circle outside town. He is secretive about his past. Other residents of Morthal distrust him. He has clearly done things that he does not talk about openly. Some fans believe Falion has a relationship with the soul cairn that goes well beyond academic study. The theory holds that Falion, at some point before arriving in Morthal, entered the soul cairn and made an arrangement with the ideal masters. Not a visit, an agreement. A formal exchange in which Falion received something: knowledge, ability, protection, extended life, in return for something ongoing. That ongoing something, in various versions of the theory, is different things. Some fans believe he feeds the ideal master's souls on a regular basis. Others believe he agreed to bring specific individuals to their attention. Others believe the arrangement is simpler, that the ideal masters simply have a claim on Falion's own soul when he eventually dies, and everything in between is his to use as he wishes. His ability to cure vampirism using a black soul gem is, in this theory, not unrelated to his arrangement. He knows exactly what he is doing with those gems, because he has a working relationship with the beings on the other end of the process. Falion stands at his summoning circle before dawn. He does not explain why he prefers that hour. The souls he receives go somewhere. The ideal masters receive something in return. The arrangement is old enough that Falion no longer thinks about it in detail. It is simply part of what he does. Black soul gems are different from ordinary soul gems. They can capture human and elven souls, the souls of sentient beings, which ordinary gems cannot hold. They are harder to obtain. They are considered morally distinct from white soul gems by most of Skyrim's population. Using them is legal, but uncomfortable in most of the holds. Some fans believe the distinction between black and white soul gems is not just moral, it is structural. They believe black and white soul gems connect to different destinations. White soul gems, when used, send their energy somewhere neutral, a dispersal into the enchantment, clean, functional. The soul is used and gone. Black soul gems connect directly to the soul cairn. The sentient soul, captured inside a black gem, does not disperse when the gem is used. It transfers. It goes to the ideal masters. This would mean that every black soul gem used in Skyrim for enchanting, for rituals, for curing vampirism, is a delivery mechanism. The enchanter thinks they are powering an object. They are also sending a soul to a place that collects souls. The ideal masters receive payment every time a black soul gem breaks. They did not build this system recently. It has been running for as long as black soul gems have existed, quietly, without announcement, processing its deliveries in the background of every enchanting table, in every hold. The ideal masters were once mortal. This is confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. They were mages who sought a way to achieve permanent existence to escape death, and found it by transforming their own souls into crystallized form. They removed themselves from the mortal cycle entirely. They became, essentially, immortal soul constructs. Some fans believe the process did not work exactly as they intended. The theory holds that, when the ideal masters crystallized their souls, they achieved permanence, but lost something they did not expect to lose. Not intelligence, not power, something more subtle. The ability to experience anything new, to grow, to change. A crystallized soul is permanent precisely because it is fixed. It does not develop. It does not respond to experience the way a living soul does. It simply continues. The ideal masters became immortal and, in the same moment, became static. They can think, they can make decisions, they can collect and trade, but they cannot feel anything they have not already felt, cannot learn anything that changes who they are, cannot become anything other than what they were at the moment of crystallization. This is why they collect souls so obsessively. They cannot experience existence themselves anymore, but they can hold the experiences of others, store them, possess them. The collection is not power. It is the closest thing to living that a being who cannot change can manage. The soul cairn is enormous. The ideal masters have been collecting for a very long time. None of what they hold can be fully experienced by them, but they keep collecting anyway. It is the only thing they know how to do. Soul gems appear in Skyrim constantly, in shops, in dungeons, in the hands of dead mages, scattered across ancient ruins. The supply is enormous. The demand from enchanters, mages, and general adventurers keeps that supply constantly moving. Some fans believe all of that movement feeds something specific. The theory holds that the soul cairn is not a finished place. It is a growing one, and what it grows on is the energy produced by the use of soul gems across Tamriel. Every soul gem used in an enchantment produces a small residual, a byproduct of the soul being broken down and released. That residual does not go into the object, it goes somewhere else. Somewhere that collects residuals from every soul gem transaction happening anywhere in the world. Over centuries, that accumulated residual has been organizing itself, slowly, without direction from any named being, becoming, incrementally, something coherent. Some fans call this entity the unnamed thing. It has no confirmed presence in any game, but the theory points to certain behaviors in the soul cairn, certain movements in the background, certain patterns in the energy flows of the realm, as evidence that something is developing there that the ideal masters did not plan for and do not fully control. It has been fed by every soul gem used in Tamriel for as long as soul gems have existed. It is not finished growing. No one has a name for it yet, because no one who has seen it clearly has found a way to say what it is. Sovngarde is the Nordic afterlife. Warriors who die in battle go there. They feast and fight and exist in a state of permanent heroic rest. It is a confirmed realm, visited by the player in Skyrim. It is a good place, by all accounts, warm, full of mead and old companions. Some fans believe the relationship between Sovngarde and the Soul Cairn is not incidental. They believe the two realms are in competition. The theory holds that souls in Tamriel do not automatically go anywhere after death. They drift. In that drifting state, they are vulnerable to being collected by the Soul Cairn, by the ideal masters, by any mechanism designed to catch them before they reach their intended destination. Sovngarde, in this theory, is a defended space. Sure, the Nordic interpretation of Lorcan built it specifically to protect certain souls from being intercepted, a place that souls could reach before the collectors got to them. The ideal masters know about Sovngarde. They cannot enter it, but they can position the Soul Cairn near the paths that souls travel, and they can catch the ones that do not make it to Shaw's Hall in time. The distinction between who ends up in Sovngarde and who ends up in the Soul Cairn is not entirely about whether you were a warrior. Some fans believe it is partly about speed, about whether something got to you first. The drift between death and destination is short, but short is not instantaneous, and the collectors are very quick. The player character in Skyrim can have their soul partially claimed by the Soul Cairn as part of the Dawnguard questline. Serana offers this as a way to enter the realm. The partial soul claim allows entry. Some fans believe the partial claim does not fully release when the player character leaves. The theory holds that entering the Soul Cairn with a partial claim leaves a permanent mark. Not the full claim, the ideal masters do not get the whole soul, but a thread, a connection between the player character and the cairn that persists after leaving. This connection does not harm the player character in any mechanical sense during the game, but in lore terms, some fans believe it means the Dragonborn's soul is never entirely free after that visit. A piece of it belongs to the cairn. A thread runs from the Dragonborn back to the Grey Plane, where the ideal masters sit among their crystals. The Dragonborn is already unusual, a mortal with a dragon's soul, a soul that cannot be normally absorbed by Alduin and cannot be normally held by ordinary soul gems. What the partial claim does to a soul of that specific nature is something the ideal masters may be more interested in than they showed. They let the Dragonborn leave. That does not mean they stopped watching. The ideal masters communicate with mortals who seek them out. They make deals. They trade souls for other things, knowledge, power, access. They are cold but consistent. They do what they agree to do. They are, in their way, reliable. Some fans believe the ideal masters are not the only intelligence operating in the Soul Cairn. The theory returns to the unnamed thing, the accumulating residual that has been organizing itself in the background of the realm for centuries. Some fans believe it has reached a point where it is aware, not intelligent in the way the ideal masters are intelligent, but aware in the way a very large, very old, very patient thing becomes aware when it has been sitting in one place long enough. The ideal masters do not discuss it. They may not fully understand it. They built the Soul Cairn to be a collection space and did not design it for something else to develop inside it without their permission. But the Soul Cairn did not ask permission. It simply grew. And what grew inside it, alongside the collected souls, is something that does not have a name because no mortal has stayed in the cairn long enough to study it carefully. The grey sky of the Soul Cairn is very still. The wandering souls do not seem to notice anything unusual. But something in the deeper parts of the realm is organized in a way that the ideal master's explicit design does not fully account for. It is patient. It has been patient for a very long time. It is in no hurry to announce itself. Soul trapping has been happening for as long as mortals in Tamriel have known it was possible, and all that time, the Soul Cairn has been receiving, growing, accumulating, becoming more of what it is. There is no era in which this started. There is no era in which it will cleanly end. It exists beside time, the way all such things do, ongoing, patient, indifferent to the rise and fall of empires happening on the surface of the world above. The gems break, the souls go somewhere, and the grey plane keeps stretching further in every direction, filling slowly with what was taken from the dead. Somewhere in that grey, flat silence, something is still becoming. In the Second Era, the long, difficult middle stretch of Tamriel's history, the Riemann Empire held Cyrodiil and much of the continent together. It was not the first empire. It would not be the last. But it shaped Tamriel in ways that still echo in the Fourth Era, in borders and laws and traditions that have outlasted the people who made them. The Riemann Empire began with a battle, or what history calls a battle. Some fans believe it was something else entirely. The Akaviri invasion happened in the early Second Era. A force from the continent of Akavir, specifically the warriors known as the Tsaeski, serpent folk from Akavir's eastern regions, crossed the sea and moved through Tamriel with military efficiency. They came in organized formations. They were not raiders. They were looking for something specific. Reman Cyrodiil, a young leader with an unusual presence, stood against them at Pale Pass. And the Akaviri, according to the official history, simply stopped fighting. They knelt. They acknowledged Reman as their lord. The invasion ended not with defeat, but with submission. Some fans believe that sequence of events does not make sense for a military force. Armies do not kneel to strangers after a single engagement, unless they had a reason to before the engagement began. The theory holds that Reman and the Akaviri leaders had already communicated before Pale Pass, that the battle itself was partially staged, a public demonstration designed to give both sides a clean story. The Akaviri needed to appear conquered. Reman needed to appear victorious. The arrangement served everyone. In exchange for the performance of submission, the Akaviri received something more durable than a military victory: integration, official roles, permanent presence in the most powerful empire in Tamriel. Pale Pass was theatre. What happened before Pale Pass was the real negotiation. The Akaviri who came to Tamriel with the invasion eventually became the Akaviri Dragon Guard, the elite personal guard of the Riemann emperors. They were extraordinarily skilled, devoted to the protection of the Reman line, and they had no known allegiance to anything in Tamriel outside of their role as protectors. Some fans believe the Dragon Guard's true purpose was not protection, it was observation. The theory holds that the Tsazi and the Akaviri, more broadly, had a deep and long-standing interest in dragonborn bloodlines. From their own history and mythology, they understood what a dragonborn was and what such a bloodline could eventually produce or prevent. They came to Tamriel specifically to find the dragonborn they had been tracking across generations. Riemann Cyrodiil was dragonborn, confirmed in lore. The Dragon Guard recognized him as such, but they did not simply serve him because they were impressed. They positioned themselves close to him because they needed to understand the dragonborn phenomenon from a proximity that only a personal guard could achieve. Everything the Dragon Guard learned about Riemann, his use of the voice, his divine connection, the mechanics of how the dragonborn power manifested in a mortal, was information they were collecting for reasons that had nothing to do with his safety. The Riemann emperors were protected by the most capable warriors in Tamriel. They were also studied by them. Both things were happening simultaneously. And the emperors, from Riemann onward, may never have known the second half of that arrangement. The Riemann line ended. The last Riemann emperor was assassinated by the Morag Tong confirmed in Elder Scrolls lore. After that, the Akaviri potentates ruled Cyrodiil as regents. Two of them, in succession, managed the empire for several centuries before the Second Era moved into its final chaotic phase. The potentates are remembered as competent administrators who kept the empire running after the Riemann line failed. Some fans believe the potentates were not administrators at all. They were the command structure of an Akaviri political institution that had been operating inside the empire the entire time, waiting for the Reman line to end. The theory holds that the Tsayeski who integrated into Tamriel after Pale Pass never stopped being primarily Akaviri in their loyalties. The Dragon Guard, the advisors, the officers who worked their way into administrative positions over generations. They were not assimilating. They were positioning. The potentates did not improvise their rule when the Remans died. They stepped into a role they had been preparing for since before Reman's grandfather was born. The succession plan was in place long before the succession became necessary. The Reman Empire, in this theory, was Akaviri managed from within for most of its existence. Reman and his descendants were the public face of an institution that had a private architecture underneath it. When the Remans ended, the private architecture simply became visible. The Reman Empire's borders shifted over its long existence. Certain regions were absorbed, others were not. Some border areas fell to external pressure and were not retaken, despite the Empire having the resources to do so. Some fans believe those losses were not failures, they were decisions. The theory holds that the Reman Empire deliberately allowed certain border regions to collapse under pressure from neighboring forces. Not because those regions were unimportant, because a region in a state of controlled conflict serves a different function than a peacefully administered province. A border zone in constant low-level conflict is a buffer. It absorbs pressure from outside the empire. It keeps threats engaged before they reach the core territories. And it does so without requiring the empire to maintain a permanent military presence, because the conflict itself does the work. The regions that fell were chosen. The populations in them were sacrificed to a strategic calculation that was never announced in any public policy document. Some fans point to specific areas in the Second Era map that show this pattern. Regions where the Empire clearly had enough strength to intervene and consistently chose not to. Where the fighting continued at a level that drained the external threat without ever resolving. The people who lived in those regions believed they had been abandoned. Some fans believed they were being used instead. The distinction would not have mattered much to the people living there. Reman Cyrodiil's charisma is noted in almost every historical text that mentions him. He was persuasive. People followed him. The Akaviri knelt to him. The Colovian lords unified under him. He built an empire partly on the force of his presence. Some fans believe that presence was not natural. They believe Reman had a passive, unconscious command of the Thuum that he used in every interaction without ever recognizing it as the voice. The theory holds that a dragonborn's connection to the language of dragons does not require deliberate use to have an effect, that the resonance of the voice, when it runs through a person's natural speech, subtly affects those who listen. Not a shout, not a command, just a quality in the voice, a depth, a weight, a sense of inevitability that makes listeners more receptive, more willing, more inclined to agree. Reman never trained with the voice the way the Greybeards teach. He never learned the specific words of power that formal practitioners study. But he was dragonborn. The connection was there. What others called charisma was the Thuum running at the lowest possible frequency, constant, uncontrolled, present in every word he spoke. The people who followed Reman believed they were choosing to follow him freely. Most people do believe that about their choices. The voice never announces itself when it works this quietly. Reman Cyrodiil's origin is described in Elder Scrolls lore in terms that are deliberately mythological. He was born from the land itself, from the soil of Cyrodiil, at a moment of great need. The land answered the need by producing him. Some fans believe this origin story was authored, not lived. The theory holds that Reman was a real person with a real, ordinary birth. But his origins were obscure enough that the story of his birth could be shaped into something more useful. Someone, possibly the Akaviri advisors who were already in place before his rise, possibly Reman himself, in his later years constructed the mythological birth narrative, because a leader who comes from the land itself is harder to depose than a leader who comes from a specific family. If you come from a family, your family can be discredited or destroyed. If you come from the land itself endorses you. The constructed origin also served to pre-answer questions about his legitimacy. Why did the Akaviri kneel? Because the land itself had produced something worthy of being knelt to. Why did the lords unify? Same reason. The origin story did the political work of a dozen military campaigns. Real history rarely produces people who emerge from the earth at moments of maximum need. Managed history sometimes does. The Morag Tong assassinated the last Reman emperor. This is confirmed. The Morag Tong is a guild of assassins with deep roots in Dunmer culture in Morrowind. Their use in Cyrodiil against the emperor raises questions about who hired them and why. Some fans believe the assassination was not a Dunmer political act. They believe it was an internal operation, sanctioned from within the empire by the same Akaviri institutional structure that had been managing the empire from below for generations. The theory holds that the potentate system was waiting for the right moment to become visible. The Riemann line had become a complication, a hereditary claim that could not be removed cleanly while a living heir existed. The Morag Tong provided distance. The assassination could be attributed to Morrowind. The potentates could step in as regents, as the obvious next administrative layer. The distance between the assassination and the potentate's assumption of power was short enough to suggest preparation. The potentates did not scramble to fill a vacuum. They were already in position when the vacancy was created. Some fans believe the Morag Tong carried out the contract without knowing who had actually issued it. They believed they were serving Morrowind's interests. The actual client had no Morrowind connection at all. The last Riemann emperor died in a city that his ancestors had built. The people who arranged for his death were already sitting in the chairs they would move into the following day. The second era, after the potentates, was chaotic. The interregnum, a long period without a unified empire, followed their rule. Multiple kings claimed Cyrodiil. Wars ran for generations. The continent fragmented. Some fans believe the interregnum was not an accident following the collapse of the Riemann potentate system. They believe it was a managed release, a period of controlled disorder. The theory holds that certain Akaviri political descendants, the heirs of the original Sashi institutional structure, recognized that a prolonged period of imperial weakness would serve specific long-term goals. Competition between human factions would thin the military strength of every claimant. Resources would be consumed in internal conflict. The eventual winner of the interregnum would inherit an exhausted continent. An exhausted continent is easier to shape than a strong one. Whatever came after the interregnum, whoever eventually unified Tamriel would be working with material that had been worn down to a more manageable state. Tiber Septim unified Tamriel at the end of the second era and the beginning of the third. He inherited exactly that situation. A continent that had been fighting itself for generations. Exhausted, ready. Whether he knew who had arranged the conditions for his rise is a question his own chapter will address. Riemann Cyrodiil's tomb is somewhere in Cyrodiil. The specific location is not a central feature of any Elder Scrolls game set in the second era or after it. He is remembered in statues and in the name of his dynasty. His physical resting place is not a pilgrimage destination. Some fans believe that absence from the historical record is deliberate, that the location of Remann's tomb was hidden and kept out of public knowledge by the potentates specifically. The theory holds that Remann's tomb contains something, not treasure, documents, records of the actual arrangements made before Pale Pass, the real terms of the Akaviri integration, the evidence of what the Dragon Guard was actually doing, the full record of what the Riemann Empire actually was beneath its official history. The potentates could not destroy these records. Reman had made sure they were preserved, but they could make the tomb difficult to find. They could let the location fade from public record over the generations they controlled the Empire's administrative memory. Riemann knew that what he had built was not entirely what it appeared to be. He may have left a record of the full version for someone with enough patience to find it. The tomb is in Cyrodiil. It has been there a long time. The records inside it, if they exist, have been waiting quietly for someone who knows what questions to ask. The Riemann Empire lasted for centuries. It produced law, infrastructure, and a model of imperial governance that the Septim Empire later built on. It was, by most measures, successful, but the foundation it was built on, the arrangement at Pale Pass, the Akaviri institutional layer underneath, the constructed mythology, the managed borders, was never fully visible to the people who lived inside it. Most people who live inside an empire do not see its foundation. They see the roads, the markets, the order that makes daily life possible. The foundation is something you only notice when it fails. The Riemann Empire's foundation did not fail dramatically. It was quietly retired when it was no longer needed. The structure above it kept standing for a while on its own weight, and then that fell too, in the interregnum, under the pressure of everything that had been building up inside it. Empires are usually remembered by what they built. Some fans believe this one should also be remembered by what it hid. The Second Era kept moving. The potentates faded. The interregnum burned through generations. And eventually, a new name rose to fill the silence that the Riemann Empire had left behind. But the arrangements made in the Second Era did not simply disappear when the era ended. Agreements between old institutions and long-lived beings do not expire with the calendar. They persist in their quiet way, in documents and bloodlines, and the habits of organizations that outlasted their original context. The Riemann Empire is over. What it put in place is a more complicated question. In the Second Era, a mage named Varnus Galerion, known as Galerion the Mystic, founded the Mages Guild. Before the guild existed, magic in Tamriel was practiced by individuals and small private orders. Knowledge was hoarded. Access was restricted. The powerful kept what they knew to themselves. Galerion, according to official history, changed that. He built an institution that would make magical knowledge available to everyone who sought it honestly. That is the official story. Some fans believe the real purpose of the guild was the opposite of what it claimed. Galerion the Mystic was a student of Manimarco, the king of Worms, the most powerful necromancer in Tamriel's history. The two studied together under the Sigic order on the island of Artaeum. They disagreed about the ethics of magic, specifically about necromancy. Galerion opposed it. Manimarco embraced it. Their conflict eventually became famous. Some fans believe that conflict was not purely about necromancy. They believe Galerion recognized, early in his life, that Manimarco represented a specific kind of threat, a supremely powerful independent mage, operating outside any structure, accountable to no one, accumulating knowledge and capability without oversight. The Mages Guild, in this theory, was Galerion's institutional response to that threat, not a school, a monitoring system. By creating an organization that independent mages were strongly encouraged to join through access to resources, legal protections, and shared knowledge, Galerion brought the majority of Tamriel's practicing mages under one roof, where they could be observed, where their research could be reviewed, where anyone developing something dangerous could be identified before they became a problem. The guild democratized magic. That part was real. But democratization also meant centralization. And centralization meant that one institution knew what every member was working on. Galerion built something that looked like a library. It also functioned as a surveillance network. The two functions were not in conflict. They were the same design. Galerion is dead. The Mages Guild he founded is also gone, by the Fourth Era disbanded after the events of Oblivion, replaced by smaller successor organizations. The Synod operates in Cyrodiil. The College of Whispers operates more quietly in other regions. The two organizations are rivals. They disagree on almost everything. They compete for imperial favor and for access to magical artifacts. Some fans believe that rivalry is not organic. They believe it was designed. The theory holds that Galerian, before his death, wrote a document, a comprehensive account of everything the Mages Guild had actually been doing beyond its official function. The monitoring, the suppressed research, the decisions about which knowledge to circulate and which to archive in places that regular members could not reach. He destroyed the document publicly. It was witnessed. The document was gone, but Galerian divided the document before destroying the copy people saw. Half of the real content went to one set of trusted individuals. The other half went to another group. Neither half makes sense without the other. Neither group can reconstruct the full document alone. The Synod has one half. The College of Whispers has the other. Neither knows the other has a half. Both believe they are preserving something unique and important that the other organization would misuse. Their rivalry keeps both halves active and protected. Neither can afford to be absorbed by the other. The competition that looks destructive from outside is, in this theory, a preservation mechanism. Galerian built the conflict into the succession. The document will remain incomplete and safely divided for as long as the rivalry continues. The College of Winterhold is the last surviving major magical institution in Skyrim during the Fourth Era. It sits on a cliff above the city of Winterhold, what remains of a city that was once much larger. The Great Collapse happened roughly 200 years before the events of Skyrim. Most of Winterhold fell into the sea during this event. The college, built further back on solid rock, survived intact. The city around it did not. The people of Winterhold blamed the college. The college maintained it had nothing to do with the collapse. Some fans believe the college is telling a partial truth. It did not cause the collapse, but it knows what did. The theory holds that an experiment conducted by college members in the period before the collapse produced results that destabilized the geological foundation beneath Winterhold's lower districts. Not immediately. The damage was slow. The connection between the experiment and the eventual collapse was not direct enough to be obvious. But the mages who ran the experiment knew, afterward, that something had gone wrong. They observed the geological changes. They tracked the instability. They made the decision not to report it first because they hoped the damage would stabilize, and then because stabilization did not happen, and by then the consequences of admitting the connection were worse than staying quiet. When the collapse happened, they were prepared to maintain the official position. No connection, natural event, no fault. The people of Winterhold are still angry 2 centuries later. The college maintains its position. Somewhere in its archives, the original experiment records still exist, probably in a section that current members do not have clearance to access. Shalador was one of the most powerful mages in Nordic history. He lived in the First Era, which means he predates the Mages Guild by a significant margin. He built a labyrinth. He conducted experiments on an entire island. He was powerful enough to move a city using only the voice. The Labyrinthian, his great construction in the mountains of Hjalmarch, is described as a test, a proving ground for mages who seek to demonstrate their skill. Some fans believe Labyrinthian was never a test. It was a trap. The theory holds that Shalador spent decades attempting to contain a specific entity, something he had encountered in his research, something powerful enough that conventional, magical containment could not hold it, and conventional destruction was not possible. The labyrinth was the solution, not a prison cell but a system, a maze designed so that the entity inside it could not orient itself well enough to apply force in any consistent direction. Movement through the maze dispersed any attempt to gather power. The design was the containment. Shalador framed it as a challenge to mages, because a challenge brings people in. People moving through the labyrinth kept the system active. Their magical presence maintained the conditions that kept the entity disoriented. The mages who tested themselves in Labyrinthian over the centuries believed they were seeking mastery. They were also, without knowing it, performing maintenance. The dragon priest Morokei was sealed inside Labyrinthian with the staff of Magnus. Some fans believe Morokei was not the entity Shalador was containing. He was added later, by someone who understood what the labyrinth was designed to do and added a secondary layer. What Shalador originally put inside is a question the labyrinth's walls do not answer directly. The Arcaneum is the library of the College of Winterhold. Urag Groshub manages it with an intensity that goes beyond professional dedication. Books are not removed from the library without his awareness. Damaged books provoke reactions from him that suggest genuine distress. Some fans believe Urag's dedication is not just personal. They believe certain books in the Arcaneum have unusual properties that require active management. The theory holds that a small number of texts in the Arcaneum collection are not stable. They respond to being read, not to being touched, being read specifically. A reader who goes through certain texts from beginning to end triggers something in the text itself, a process. After the reading is complete, the text begins to change, slowly. Over hours or days, the words shift, rearrange, replace themselves with something different from what was there before. The book eventually settles into a new version of itself, containing information that was not in the original text. This could mean the books are recording themselves based on who reads them, updating their content with the reader's response, their questions, their state of mind at the time of reading. Or it could mean something is writing in the books from outside, using them as a slow communication channel, waiting for the right reader to leave enough of an impression that a meaningful response can be composed. Urag knows which books behave this way. He monitors them. He does not explain his monitoring to others. What the books contain after their changes is something he has been tracking alone for a long time. Manimarco is the enemy Galarian spent much of his life opposing, the necromancer who sought godhood, who achieved something like it in the events of Daggerfall, who appears in multiple Elder Scrolls games as a persistent, evolving threat. Some fans believe the Mages Guild's founding was not just a response to the general problem of unregulated magic. It was a specific response to Manimarco. The theory holds that Galarian's primary goal in building the guild was to create an institution capable of tracking Manimarco's activities across Tamriel, a network of mages in every major city, collecting information, monitoring magical disturbances, reporting on necromantic activity, all of it organized in a way that could eventually locate and counter whatever Manimarco was building toward. The guild's anti-necromancy rules were not just ethical positions, they were diagnostic tools. Any mage who pushed back against those rules, who showed unusual interest in soul mechanics or death magic, became a person of interest in a quiet, internal investigation. Manimarco knew about the guild. He worked around it. He operated in gaps between guild influence and built his own parallel network. The competition between Galarian's official institution and Manimarco's unofficial one ran for centuries. The guild is gone. Manimarco is still in the world in some form. Some fans believe the outcome of that competition is not yet determined. The Psijic Order is older than the Mages Guild, older than most things in Tamriel with a name. They are a monastic order of mages who live on the island of Artaeum, an island that appears and disappears from the world at intervals. They do not involve themselves in politics. They observe. Occasionally they intervene, briefly and precisely, in events they have decided matter. Galarian was trained by them. He left their order to found the guild. Some fans believe he never fully left. The theory holds that the Mages Guild was, from its founding, partially a Psijic project. Not controlled by them, Galarian was genuinely independent, but observed by them, occasionally steered through small interventions in guild leadership over the generations. The Psijic Order's interest in the guild would be consistent with their general pattern of watching significant institutions without formally participating in them. The guild was the most significant magical institution in Tamriel. The Psijics would not ignore it. Some fans believe that certain turning points in guild history moments where the institution made decisions that seemed slightly too correct for the circumstances involved quiet guidance from Artaeum, a word in the right ear, a piece of information that arrived at precisely the right moment. help that looked like coincidence. Artaeum disappears from the world for long stretches. When it is gone, the Psijics are still watching. They simply watch from a place that cannot be found. Magic in the Second Era was organized by the Guild into schools: destruction, restoration, alteration, illusion, conjuration, enchanting. The classification system that players use in Skyrim comes directly from Guild taxonomy. Some fans believe that taxonomy was not just organizational, it was restrictive. The theory holds that the schools of magic, as Galerian defined them, drew deliberate boundaries around types of magical practice. The boundaries determined what was considered legitimate, what was teachable, what was fundable, what a guild member could study without oversight. Magic that fit within the schools was normal. Magic that did not fit, that crossed boundaries or refused categorization, became by definition irregular, suspect, the kind of practice that attracted attention from the guild's monitoring functions. Certain types of magic that existed before the guild's classification were gradually pushed out of mainstream practice simply by being defined as outside the approved categories. The practitioners who worked in those areas were not expelled. They were marginalizers. They stopped being part of the conversation. What was lost in that process? What types of magical knowledge were effectively discontinued by being defined as abnormal is something that cannot be fully known, because the record of pre-guild magical practice is fragmentary. The schools of magic feel natural now. They have been the framework for so long that it is hard to imagine a different organization. That is what a successful taxonomy does. It eventually feels like it was always there. The Mages Guild dissolved in the late Third Era after the Oblivion Crisis. The organization that had structured magical practice across Tamriel for most of its recorded history simply ended. Its buildings were transferred to other uses. Its resources were distributed or lost. Its membership dispersed. Some fans believe the dissolution was not a collapse. It was a completion. The theory holds that the Mages Guild had a built-in endpoint. That Galerian, in designing the institution, had a specific goal in mind, a particular outcome that the guild was working toward over its entire existence. When that outcome was achieved, the guild no longer needed to exist. What that goal was, the theory does not agree on. Some fans say it was the containment of Manimarco, which the events of Oblivion addressed in certain ways. Some say it was the preservation of specific knowledge through the Oblivion Crisis, getting particular information safely through that period and into whatever came after. Some fans believe the guild's dissolution was simply the final step in Galerian's original design. He built it to do a specific thing over a specific span of time. When the time ended, the institution released itself. An organization that can end deliberately is a different kind of institution than one that simply falls. One was built with a purpose. The other was built to last. Galerian the Mystic was a careful man. Some fans believe he knew, when he founded the guild, roughly when it would end, and he built accordingly. The Second Era left magic in Tamriel, organized, classified, and institutionalized in ways that shaped every era after it. The guild is gone, but the schools of magic it defined are still the framework. The buildings it built still stand in some cities. The habits of thought it established are still in use. Institutions do not disappear completely when they close. They leave their shape behind in the things that outlast them. Galerian built something that lasted longer than he did, shaped more of Tamriel than he planned for, and ended in a way that he may have designed in advance. Whether the full version of what he built was ever visible to anyone but him is something the Arcaneum's shifting books have not yet clearly said. There is no moment when the Elder Scrolls began, no era in which they were made, no craftsman whose name can be attached to them. They exist in the world, the way certain very old things exist, without a clear origin, without a clear purpose, and without any indication that they will stop existing when everything around them is gone. Scholars have studied them for ages. Moth priests have devoted their sight to them. Emperors have sent expeditions to find them. None of this has produced a satisfying answer to the most basic question: What are they, exactly? The most widely held position in Elder Scrolls lore is that the scrolls were not made by any being, they simply exist. They grew out of the fabric of Aetherius, the plane of pure magic that Magnus fled to as a natural consequence of creation. Some fans believe that explanation, while possibly accurate, does not go far enough. The theory holds that the Elder Scrolls are a side effect of a specific event, the creation of Nirn itself. When the Atada poured their power and intention into the physical world, they created more than a planet. They created a record of the process. The scrolls are not descriptions of what happened during creation. They are what happened, preserved in readable form. Each scroll contains a fragment of the original act of creation, a piece of the intention, the decision, the moment of sacrifice that built the world. Reading a scroll is not reading a description of those events. It is touching the events themselves, directly, without any distance. This is why the experience overwhelms a mortal mind. The mind is not equipped to contain a direct experience of creation. It was built inside that creation. Looking at the source of your own existence from the inside is not something a fixed mind can do without losing some of its fixedness. The blindness that comes from reading a scroll is not damage. It is the mind's response to having briefly contained something much larger than itself. Reading an Elder Scroll shows the reader something true. In confirmed lore, the scrolls reveal moments in time past, present, and future, with a clarity that no other method of divination can match. They are used at critical moments, by people who need to see through time. Some fans believe the experience is more overwhelming than it appears from the outside. The theory holds that reading an Elder Scroll does not show the reader one future. It shows them all of them simultaneously, every possible branch, every version of events that could follow from the current moment, every path not taken, and every path not yet chosen. The reader does not receive a clear vision. They receive the full weight of total possibility, every outcome equally real, equally present, layered on top of each other without hierarchy or preference. The blindness, in this theory, is not a cost paid for knowledge. It is the mind refusing to choose. To look at all possible futures at once is to be paralyzed by their equal reality. The mind, unable to select one future over all others, simply stops processing the visual information it cannot usefully interpret. Moth priests train for decades before attempting to read a scroll. Part of what they train is the ability to choose, to let most of what they see pass without anchoring to it, to come away with a single coherent thread from an experience that contains far too many threads for any mortal mind to hold. The training does not prevent the blindness. It just makes the reading useful before the blindness arrives. The Moth Priests are the only order specifically trained to read the Elder Scrolls. They are based in the Imperial City. They spend years in preparation. They read the scrolls as their primary function, and they go blind, one reading at a time, until they can read no more. Some fans believe the Moth Priests are not scholars, they are sacrifices. The theory holds that the Elder Scrolls require something to maintain their legibility, not ink, not physical care, the sight of the reader. Each reading draws something from the person doing the reading and deposits it into the scroll itself. The Moth Priest's progressive blindness is not a side effect, it is a payment. The scroll takes something real from each reader, not just a metaphorical cost, but an actual transfer of perceptual capacity from the mortal to the object. This would mean the scrolls are parasitic in a very specific way. They can only be read at a cost. And the institution built around reading them, the order, the training, the careful selection of priests, is a system designed to supply that cost on a regular schedule. The Moth Priests believe they serve knowledge. Some fans believe they serve the scrolls. The distinction matters more to the priests than it does to the scrolls. What the sight goes to, what it feeds, is something the theory does not resolve cleanly. Some fans point toward Magnus in Aetherius, others toward the scrolls as independent entities that simply need periodic feeding to remain active. The Elder Scrolls have been collected, lost, hidden, stolen, and studied throughout Tamriel's history. Several appear in Skyrim. One is used at the throat of the world to learn the Dragonrend shout. Another is connected to the vampire questline in Dawnguard. Some fans believe there is a scroll that describes the end of the Elder Scrolls themselves. The theory holds that among the total number of scrolls in existence, one contains a prophecy that is different from all others, not a description of a future event in Tamriel. A description of the scroll's own conclusion, the moment when the last scroll is read for the last time and the entire collection ceases to function. This scroll has been read once, by one person, a moth priest, who went blind instantly, not gradually, as normally happens, but all at once, completely, in the moment of reading. That priest never spoke about what they saw. They lived out the rest of their life in silence on the subject. When they died, whatever they had read died with them. The other moth priests know this scroll exists. It is not destroyed because it cannot be, but it is not made available. It sits somewhere in the Imperial Archive, separated from the others. No one is assigned to read it. Some fans believe the reason it has not been read again is simple. The first reading was enough to confirm that reading it again would accelerate the timeline it describes. Some fans have noticed something in the way Elder Scrolls are described across multiple games. Each generation of reader seems to find slightly less content in them than the previous one. Early accounts of scroll readings describe visions of enormous scope and duration. Later accounts describe shorter, more focused experiences. The theory holds that the scrolls are shrinking, not physically. The objects do not change in size or appearance, but the content accessible inside them, the depth of the experience, the range of what can be seen, has been decreasing over time. Why this would happen, the theory offers several possibilities. The most common version holds that each reading removes something from the scroll, not the sight of the reader. In addition to that, something of the content itself. Each time a scroll is read, it is slightly less complete than it was before. If this is true, then the moth priests' centuries of diligent reading have been gradually emptying the scrolls rather than interpreting them. The institution dedicated to understanding the scrolls is also the institution most responsible for their degradation. They did not know this was happening. There is no way to compare your reading to a reading from 3 centuries ago. Each reader has only their own experience. The scrolls are still legible. They are still real and still powerful. But some fans believe they are not what they were, and that what they were, at the beginning, would have been incomprehensible to any mortal who encountered them. The Elder Scrolls appear in locations across Tamriel that seem arbitrary. One is in a Dwemer ruin. One is in a vampire stronghold. One is kept in the Imperial Library. One is in the possession of a moth priest who does not want to discuss it. Some fans believe the distribution is not arbitrary. They believe the scrolls move, not by themselves, not in the way a living thing moves, but through the hands of people who are guided to carry them to specific places. People who believe they are making independent decisions about where the scrolls should be kept, not realizing that the belief itself is part of the guidance. The scrolls, in this theory, arrange their own storage. They create conditions small, subtle, each one individually explicable as coincidence that result in specific people acquiring them and taking them to specific places. Places where the scroll needs to be for reasons connected to future events. The scroll in the Dwemer ruin was not left there by accident. The scroll in the vampire stronghold was not simply stolen and forgotten. Each location is a position. Each position is part of a larger arrangement that no single person understands, because no single person can see all of it at once. The scrolls are not waiting to be found. They are waiting in the right place to be found by the right person at the right time. Everything else is them getting there. There are moth priests who have read many scrolls before going fully blind. In those final stages of their service, after their sight is mostly gone, when they read by touch and by the vibrations of the moths that give their order its name, some of them report experiences that differ significantly from their early readings. Some fans believe that in those final readings, with most of their sight already gone, moth priests are experiencing the scrolls differently, more directly. The theory holds that ordinary sight interferes with the scroll experience. The visual processing that a sighted reader brings to the reading creates a layer of interpretation, the mind trying to translate what it receives into something it can see. This translation reduces the experience, makes it more comprehensible but less complete. A reader who has almost no sight left brings less interpretive interference. They receive more of the raw experience. They touch the scroll content more directly. What they experience in those final readings, what a moth priest with almost no sight receives from a scroll, is something none of them have described in terms that other people could understand. The language available to a mortal mind was not built for it. They come away from those final readings changed, not damaged, changed, quieter, less interested in things they were once deeply invested in, as though something they encountered in the reading reorganized what they considered important. The Order considers those final readings the most sacred. They do not discuss what happens in them. The priests who come back from them do not seem to feel they have lost something. They seem to feel they have arrived somewhere. The number of Elder Scrolls in existence is not confirmed in any lore source. Multiple scholars have tried to count them. No count agrees with any other count. Some fans believe the scrolls are not countable, not because there are too many, but because the number changes. The theory holds that Elder Scrolls come into existence when the conditions require them to, not made by anyone, not grown from anything, simply present when a moment arrives that needs a record. A historical event of sufficient weight, an event that reshapes what is possible in the world, generates a scroll. The scroll records the event's full dimensions, including its causes and its consequences, in a form that extends both backward and forward from the moment itself. This would mean the collection of Elder Scrolls is not fixed. It grew during periods of great historical activity and may have produced nothing new during long, quiet stretches. The scrolls that exist today are a record of every moment in Tamriel's history that was large enough to require one. Some fans believe the Oblivion Crisis generated a new scroll. Some believe the return of Alduin and the events of Skyrim generated one. These scrolls, if they exist, have not been located yet. They may not be locatable yet. New scrolls, in this theory, take time to become legible. The event has to finish becoming what it is before the record of it can be read. The scrolls contain the history of the world, the future of the world, the possible variations of both. They are objects of extraordinary importance and extraordinary cost, and they belong to no one, not to the empire that tried to collect them, not to the order that tried to read them, not to the gods who may have generated them. Some fans believe this non-belonging is the most important thing about the scrolls, that what makes them different from every other powerful object in Tamriel is that no one owns them. No one can own them. Any attempt to control them, to use them for a specific agenda, to direct what they reveal and what they hide, fails eventually. The scrolls have their own arrangement, their own positions in the world, their own schedule for being found and read, and for what they show when they are. The moth priests serve them, the emperors sought them, the scholars study them, and through all of it, the scrolls remain completely indifferent to any of it. They existed before the first civilization. They will exist, in some form, after the last one closes its doors. Whatever they are not waiting for anything that mortals can provide. They are simply present, persistent, quietly legible to those with the capacity and the willingness to pay for what reading them costs. The moths circle them in the dark. The silk is old. The sight goes, one reading at a time. And the scrolls stay exactly as they have always been, patient, complete, going nowhere.